listening to episode 114 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today we have Adam Bergstrom, a regular guest on the show, this time to talk about poop, digestion, constipation, loose stools, all that fun stuff. He was actually a colon hydrotherapist for years. So he got to see all sorts of things come out of people's rectums. I've actually only got a colonic once, and that was a really interesting experience. Didn't have too much of a profound effect from it, except I felt a little more relaxed. But it's interesting, even though Adam used to be one, he doesn't think that they're necessary anymore, if I understood him correctly. So in this interview, we talk about colon health, different conditions like irritable bowel disease, IBD, talk about pH, talk about lippfuscin and how that affects digestion. And while we focus on intestinal health in Adam style, we go all over the place, and he drops bombs throughout the entire show. One that really shifted my perception that involves tequila and pineapple juice. That's why I really love having Adam on the show, and that's why he's a return guest. I always learn something new and something that I can even implement into my life. So enjoy the show. Here is the legend, Adam Bergstrom. All right, I am here back with Mr. Adam Bergstrom. Welcome to the show.
Greetings, Earthlings. Good to be
back,
here, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah, I always have the most questions. It's record number of questions that listeners send in whenever I have you on the show, and it's fun because, like you said, he mounted his horse and rode off in all directions, and that's been most of our shows together, I believe.
I hope I have enough answers to match all the questions.
Yeah, so for this show, we'll focus, at least for the first half or so, mostly on the intestinal health and large intestine, small intestine, the colon, the gut, the stomach, and poop. And you've actually been writing newsletters about this, right? Called Turd Eye.
I think I'm on my third one now. And I used to write a newsletter back in the typewriter days and send it out in the 90s called Turd Eye. And then I decided to resurrect it with did the sex newsletter, and then I thought, golly, I know so much about poop. I was a super duper pooper scooper or colonic therapist myself back in the day. And I learned a lot from Donald Lay, who knew things about the colon that I never suspected, let's say. But it's life begins in the colon. You've seen those pamphlets, death begins in the colon, but also the life force. If you think of the colon as a caterpillar and the brain as a butterfly and how that transmutation occurs, that's actually possible in the human body. We have the capacity to go into what Donald Lay called butterflyhood, and it's been called the diamond body. And it really does exist. Some people have made it. I'm not there, but I'm working on it. I'm just a little lump of coal and going to be a diamond someday, like the song says.
Yeah, I did the colon hydrotherapy session, I think once, and she was telling me stories of like stickers from fruit coming out of people and the parasites. And I think in a previous episode, I think it was the last one, I mentioned psyllium husk because I thought that was like a decent fiber. And he said, watch out because you've seen that get stuck in people's intestinal tract, right?
Oh, just like glue. It sticks it up quite a bit. In fact, a lot of people, when you take the dietary fiber that comes with the food, it's designed to match the ingredients. But when you take it separate, whether it's oat bran or wheat bran or whatever, it gets people into trouble. In fact, I'd read all the scientific research and found out that that oat bran is water soluble and wheat bran isn't. So I was recommending people take some oat bran. Well, I told Donald Lee about that, and he said, "Be my guest." And when he said that, it usually meant, "Uh-oh, you're in trouble." Well, shortly, 6 months later, they had a deal in the paper about a man who had taken oat bran and it had stuck like cement in the small intestine, and they had to do surgery to cut it out. And by the end of a year, they were warning people this was becoming epidemic. And you barely heard that, certainly not at the health food store. Epidemic that surgeons were cutting people open to take out the water-soluble oat bran. And they were saying, if you take it, it's okay, but take no more than a tablespoon to an 8-ounce glass of water and drink 16 ounces of liquid after you take it. That's a lot different than they told you. So I stopped taking it at that point.
I think I saw a post by you today. It said constipation is the real epidemic.
It is. Yeah, and it's interesting how it's increasing because a lot of conditions, IBD and all that, is now a global emerging problem. Where have we heard that before? And it's, but the reason is that people are taking all these antibiotics and even a lot of probiotics are actually problematical. When you think of it, what is a probiotic? It's an endosome, an exosome. And what do they tell you about exosomes? They're trying to get rid of them, and they're taking them at the same time. We have two hemispheres of the brain, and one doesn't compute with the other often. You'll hear one thing about taking something like quercetin, but you'll find it in poison manuals as a mutagen and carcinogen. And many things are sold like that. Here's a trick for people. Go to Ruth Winter's or one of these books that have ingredients that are added as food additives. She has one for cosmology, for cosmetic ingredients, and then one for food ingredients. I think she has a drug one too. But go in and look at, when you ever see a new supplement come out, go to that manual, and you'll find out it was something that came in 55-gallon drums, but they can make more money selling it as a brand new antioxidant, and it must be good because it has 62 letters in the word, plus a lot of hyphens and Greek letters too to prove it.
Docosahexaenoic acid, right?
Yeah, exactly. They go into all of these names, and and again, they avoid the short names. Like, it must be bad for you because it's only 3 letters. Fat must be bad because it's only 4 letters. Salt must be bad. It's only 5 letters. Sugar. So they've got us bamboozled that those things are bad for us, and yet they've been around since, wherever we came from, it's been around a long, long, long time. And that must be bad. But these new chemicals, they have no idea. Even Ray Peat says that usually to tell if a drug or a supplement has any effect on the human body, you need 50 years at least to tell the study. And of course, they do a study and it's out in 6 months or whatever after that, after they run rats and don't realize the side effects. Just like chemotherapy, a lot of people, it doesn't kill. It actually can cure cancer, but they're guaranteed several other cancers on top of that, whether it's 5 years or 6 years. They cleverly call a cancer survivor 5 years because that's all they're going to give them after that. It's anybody's guess, and it's not the same cancer that comes back. It's a whole bunch of other cancers that come back.
Wow. Yeah, really good points. And I think with the probiotics, like the strains matter. And I used to be in the faulty, like, kind of view that, the more the better. And so I was making my sauerkraut, my kombucha, and just pouring in 40 strain capsules. I was just like, the more diversity, the better. But that's kind of playing with fire when you don't know what each of them do and, the current state of your intestinal tract. I mean, I'd imagine there's so much context involved. With any supplement, right? I mean, I think people taking iron supplements today is like, it's doing more damage, right, than it used to.
Yeah, I went for the iron supplement thing, but I figured that out in the 80s, that I saw all the iron overloads that were occurring. And interesting enough, I found out through being an iridologist, but one of the Joseph Deck type. The American iridologist, Bernard Jensen, it was mostly pop iridology. But in the Deck books, you could see these little spots in the eyes. And to my amazement, it was caused by iron. And it looks like a swarm of bees if you under a microscope, really small, dark, brown, black spots in the eye. And by that time, it's too late. The person has probably already had congestive heart failure. The liver is trashed completely. And unfortunately, that's an iridological sign that it's too late. It's never too late, but basically, you're late in the game. You've got some major healing to do at that time.
Yeah, on this topic, it was really fun to listen to you and Justin and Morley Robbins talk about lippfuscin together.
Right.
And I love Morley, and it's interesting that he thinks that iron is the main component of lippfuscin. But I don't know if we could break it down by percentage. I've never seen a study where it's like lippfuscin is 90% iron and 10% PUFA, right?
It's only 1%, but it's a powerful 1%. See, it's the difference between if you take a glass of water versus a glass of bleach, there's quite a difference. So iron, when it gets in the lippfuscin, becomes very dangerous. Iron in some places in the body is okay. Often we make tumors to store it. A lot of toxins are either tumorized. In fact, as a general rule, brown-eyed people tend to tumorize, and blonde-eyed people tend to eject. So they're more prone to diarrhea and diseases of so-called autoimmunity, and while brown-eyed people tend to tumorize it. And you tumorize it to protect yourself. It can't go anywhere, and then you gradually release it. And if you know what you're doing, you can release all those tumors without them becoming carcinogenic or anything, which is the irritation and inflammation that does that.
Wow. So when you say 1% of lippfuscin, was it PUFA or iron that's 1%?
1% is the iron. Yeah, in fact.
Oh, the iron, wow.
And most of the lippfuscin is protein fragments. It's protein, actually. But that protein, they speculate, because really there's no money in studying lippfuscin, even though it's a cause of a high percentage of diseases, and certainly a major cause of aging. But the protein fragments, they think, are actually remnants of the mitochondria that it's cannibalized and put in there. So it's like a waste product. It's basically the lippfuscin of lippfuscin. It's the waste product that it has to carry around while it's busy toxifying us. And eventually the protein overwhelms it. But as Peskin, Dr. Peskin, who I really kind of don't follow his advice, he's a fish guy that avoid fish oil, but these other oils are okay. One thing he does get correct is that even though lippfuscin is less in oil, there's a smaller amount of oil, it's the oil that controls everything. And that matches Emmanuel Ribisi. He said the whole idea of pH in the body, or acid alkaline, is based on the oils, not on the minerals, not on all these other things they blame it on. It's actually sterols, like cholesterol, and fatty acids, which make you alkaline, strangely enough. And Dr. Peskin has grasped that, at least. Most of his other ideas, avoid sugar and all this other stuff, mostly nonsense. But that one he got right.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest myths, right, in the health field, and I'm sure this relates to poop and constipation, but the whole like celery juice, green juice phase, which just really took off, I think, really the last 5 or 10 years. But they, green juices make you alkaline, right? It's going to clean you up. But as you wrote a newsletter, Acidify or Die, we're more acid than alkaline, right?
Yep, there are two. Well, actually, strangely enough, we're more alkaline, but that's the part that is the brakes. It's also the part that breaks us down. It's catabolism. Anabolism, or growing muscle, is the acid part. And that's why the alkaline part is more our structure. But if you have a chef, he puts the lid on a pot because that keeps the life force of the acids from going away. They are very volatile often. Malic acid disappears like that. Citric acid disappears like that. The kind they make in the lab is a different thing. It's not really the same citric acid like in an orange. But those, why doesn't an acid or a lemon or an orange acidify you? Because it drops into the stomach, it goes poof, it's gone. Then all you have is the stomach acid. That's why it's the residue that ultimately makes you alkaline. But when you hold that lemon or orange in your mouth, you can rot your teeth out by actually, it's so caustic it can take the enamel off your teeth. So it's good not to hold an orange in your mouth for 25 minutes or something like that, which most people will swallow it. And maybe you take a pinch of cayenne because it makes you salivate, and then it's all, your teeth are protected at that point.
I think it was one of our first interviews. You brought up grapefruit, because I think my friends brought me like a box of grapefruit. This is when I was still in California. But on the topic of digestion, didn't you say something about an enzyme in grapefruit that kind of inhibits digestion? Like you don't want to overdo it with those, or? Yeah,
a grapefruit is actually can be estrogenic, so you have to be careful with it. It's kind of the rogue of the citrus family, and it doesn't combine with certain things, but it can hold a drug in your liver for 10 to 20 times longer than it normally would. And the whole idea is to flush it out. That's why when people get radiation from, what was the name of it? I have to think of the type of, they used some type of chemotherapy at one time. But if you took a couple of glasses of water, it would go out of your bladder really quickly. And actually, a hip doctor would tell you to do that, because then you're not going to have subsequent reactions to it later and cancers, because it comes out of your body. Platinum, cisplatinum. Cisplatinum, if you take it and you get it out of your bladder as fast as possible, or through the liver, because it will go through it. But this drug holds toxins in your liver 10 to 20 times as longer. That's in a grapefruit. And this has been known from people's pharmacy days, on and on. There's all kinds of warnings. Well, I thought, I'm going to take my coffee at stomach time, and then I want the caffeine to stay in my body, so I'll wait a couple of hours to get it out of my stomach, take the caffeine and hold it out. But it doesn't work for caffeine. It only works for sulfur-based elements. Anything that has sulfur, including sulfide drugs, and a lot of these MSM products and stuff like that, it holds it in for a lot longer. And they're not supposed to be in there a long time. So if you're going to eat grapefruit, and the case for it is quinine, it does have quinine in the skin. Maybe people who believe that works on the unidentified thing we won't talk about today might take it. But basically, no, it's a good one to avoid using. But once in a while for therapy, it can actually clean the gallbladder, by the way. You can take some of that, and it will cause the gallbladder to spasm, while the other citrus fruits, with the possible exception of lemon or lime, might not do.
Yeah, I remember years ago I was minutes away from doing a gallbladder flush, and I'm so glad I didn't pull the trigger. But I bought all the grapefruits and then the Epsom salt that I was going to take orally, and I think that's like the major combo there. And I think you said it can cause damage.
I've done about 5 of them, and one time I went to El Paso, and I knocked on the door of my friend that I used to stay with, and she says, "You're just in time. My friend's having a gallbladder attack." So I run in there, and I pressed reflexes on the foot. You know, in foot reflexology, you have a gallbladder point right on the right foot, and so I pressed it, and the stone either passed or more likely fell back out of the blockage. So she was okay. But then she told me she was due for gallbladder surgery on Monday. And this was a Friday, I think I showed up. So I told her about that gallbladder flush. And even though those little green things coming out are not gallstones, it apparently moved it away, because she went in and said, "I don't have a problem." The doctor took an x-ray. Says, "I don't see what I saw before, so no surgery." So she never got the surgery. So it does do something. Wow. I've done 4 or 5. They're brutal purges, and they can be dangerous. One of those does get caught in the duct and you're in trouble. What most people don't realize is the biggest gallstones form in the colon. Speaking about the colon, this is actually in one of my issues of Turd Eye. They accumulate calcium and other elements around them, and a gallstone the size of, say, a small marble can grow into the size of a golf ball, or they've even grown as big as a baseball. Now, people die when they hit the ileocecal valve, which can't pass them. They block. And so many gallbladder deaths, maybe most of them, are caused by actually the colon, not coming out of the biliary duct and or the gallbladder itself, or the coduct, the combination, whatever they call that, the splenic duct and the gallbladder duct there. I used to wonder, well, how could it, if it got through that duct, how could it get through the? Why couldn't it just go through the ileocecal valve? And that's why they grow in there and mutate. Any irritation that, if you have something that stays in the colon, like you swallowed something, people swallow amazing things, including sewing needles and awls and all kinds of things like that. It stays in there as an irritant, and it forms, it gets encrusted, and that encrusting is what causes the problem. It might be encrusting for 10 years before the problem happens, and no one would ever suspect, oh, it's that sewing needle I swallowed. By the way, in one of my Turd Eye newsletters, Adonal Lay told me something that I found hard to believe, but now it's more believable. He said there's a technique called golden needle technique. You take a needle and slip it into the thumb and push the whole needle in. It has to be gold. And then it comes out the big toe 3 or 5 or 7 years later. And I thought, no, wait a minute. This is just a little too much for me, Adonal Lay. But now, to my amazement, going through the old medical records, there are cases of people swallowing pins and it coming out the feet and coming out the thigh and coming out bizarre places of the body. There's many cases of it, actually. So a needle can get in, and I think Red Pete has talked about this too, that cells move through your body. And so obviously they can move other things through your body. So to avoid the inflammation, they can shuttle it through your entire body, from your intestines all the way down to your feet. That's like, 2 or 3 feet in distance that it can transport it. So it's a very real thing. That may have been in my last Turd Eye newsletter, but I was astonished to find that myself.
Wow. Do you think different meridians of the body carry different minerals? Something?
I think they're associated with it. I don't think they carry it directly. And I more or less, in my research, and acupuncturists are probably going to disagree with me, some may not. There used to be a system in aircraft called Omni Radio. They may still have it. Basically, you could take your bearing by a signal here and a signal there, a signal on, and then you use those. There's no physical connection except radio waves. And I think that so-called the bonum corpuscles and all they try to explain it with in physiology, I think it's more like a radio communication using electromagnetics. And that's my interpretation of it. But anyway, they definitely exist. They're very real. They've been tested. Sometimes people get burn injuries and a meridian is measured out in their body. And there are acupuncture zones too, 5 zones that seem to match what we call the 5 tattvas. We have the physical or precipitate matter on the pinky. On the ring finger, we have the water liquid or the liquid or the hydraulic level of our body. In the middle finger, we have the fire level. Maybe that's why the finger is so effective for the international gesture of recognition. And it's basically plasma or fire or magnetics. And then you have the gaseous level, which is the 4th level, and the 5th is the sonic level. And the 5th level is the one that crosses over all of them, either under or over them to make the martial arts fist. And the sonic level is the highest level of evolution. going downward into gaseous pressure, pneumatic pressure, through plasma, through liquid, and then through precipitate matter. And it's really interesting how that works. And I believe the ancients who knew about this a long time ago were absolutely right.
A friend just told me about a really good acupuncturist in town where I live that I guess kind of integrates esoterics and stuff. Like, she's really good, been doing it for decades. I've never had it done. Do you think, I mean, I think I've heard stories of it helping people's digestion, on the topic of poop, defecation, but everything, right? Emotional, with just sticking those little needles at specific points.
It can help. Most acupuncturists are trained with TCM, and again, acupuncturists are going to get on me for this, but there is no such thing. Traditional Chinese medicine was invented by Mao Zedong. He made it up. There's no traditional Chinese medicine. It's just like saying traditional American Indian medicine. One tribe had a different medicine than the other. Now, it happened through the Wudang monks and through other monks and different schools. They did evolve certain systems that were very sophisticated. Acupuncture has been developed in other countries, though, simultaneously in the United States and in France and in Russia and other places in the world that doesn't really relate to the same type of acupuncture. So pioneers like Marc Siem, Janet Trevelle, the French acupuncturist whose name is escaping me, Felix something or other, they realized that the points move. And my mentor, Donald Lay, told me the same thing, that a point can move from as much as a half an inch or more on your hand or your foot or your leg. And, of course, TCM is based on it's right here between this fossa and that exact, because supposedly Chinese knew they couldn't sell it to American doctors if they said it moved mystically around the body. So that's what they did. And it definitely does move. I've even had a friend of mine that was an excellent acupuncturist in San Francisco. She asked me, why does it move? So then I answered the question by asking Donald Lay. And automatically, by being in light flow or magnetic flow, which is with the blood flow or against the blood flow, can actually affect that. So if you're in light flow, your energy follows the blood. It's called cosmodyne energy. If you back it up, it's called magnetic energy, and it's not light flow, but it will generate psychic abilities and all kinds of things. But if you notice, almost all psychic abilities are built on trauma. Peter Herkos fell off a ladder and suddenly he can tell things. Even in the movie with Christopher Walken, remember? He has an accident, he's in a coma for 8 years, and he wakes up and he can read people's minds and tell the future. Well, there's a lot to that. If you see a psychic, a genuine psychic, there's a lot of phony balonies out there, then they've got hit on the head. They've had an injury and serious trauma, but they can do the job.
I've heard too, like, do you think shutting off our major senses, like our 5 senses, like touch, sight, sound, like shutting those down will activate our other, like our 6th sense and 7th sense and all those?
Yeah, the 6th sense is powerful. We don't even need it, though. Most people do the other senses and use it in so-called psychic abilities. But we can't even go beyond that. What's his name? Sheldrake, Rudolph Sheldrake. He has done those research on dogs, where they know the master's coming home. I have personal experience with that. A friend of mine is a psychologist in La Jolla, California, and she has 2 little dogs. She'll be 5 minutes away from home, and they run to the garage door where she comes in, and they bark and bark and bark and bark. When I first noticed that, and I saw her come after that I would watch him, and then I would run out and look out the window and wait for her to come. And sure enough, 3 to 5 minutes later, she'd drive up. Now, either they had super hearing and could hear that car from a mile away, possible, but we do have those senses. The other senses, though, I studied colonic therapy, to get back on the subject, with a Dr. Merrill Roy out of Arizona. And at one point, I had a friend of mine named Margie said, "Did you get a psychic reading from Dr. Roy?" And I said, he gives psychic readings? He never told me anything like that. Because I studied at his colonic school in Arizona, Mesa, I believe it was. So anyway, I asked him, do you do psychic readings? He said, no. He says, through experience, I have learned to feel the heat radiations off a person's body. I'll show you. So I lay down and he said, you got a problem here. No, wow, that's remarkably clear. Here's your problem. And I knew about that problem, and he was right. And then I saw him do that with several other people, just from feeling the heat off of the person's body that radiates. You may have seen this guy on Patrick Bet-David that was a gambler, and he was blind, but then he could feel by the weight of the cards what card it was, and he could shuffle them up and always get the ace and do all these things. He could feel individual. He had a type of touch that we can only imagine, that we don't think is possible. But you'll keep finding people like that who break the so-called rules, and it's not psychic. But there are psychics. I've definitely experienced. I worked in a metaphysical bookstore and managed it for 5 or 6 years, on and off. And I met a lot of fakes, and I met a lot of real people too. Yep.
That's awesome. So would you say, like, because you were talking about body temperature, does constipation heat someone up or cool them down, or like what are the basic? Because that seems like a real epidemic, right? People generally they're more backed up than they are too loose and going too often. It's kind of hard to happen, right?
Definitely. Most people are backed up because our food doesn't have the natural roughage and dietary fiber. Like in tribal society, they usually ate foods that would make they have a heavier bowel movement. The average Westerner, when they have a bowel movement, they think that's undigested food. Only about 5%, maybe even 2% in some people, is food. The rest of it is mucus and bacteria. Those are bacterial colonies that are going in the toilet. Many people can fast and still have a big bowel movement if they do long-term fasting. Not advised for a lot of people, but some people are going to do it. But they'll find that the bowel movements keep coming. I've done purges where after 6 days I couldn't get anything out. And then suddenly I took like corn oil and tomato juice, and the most stinky things came out, and I had to run to the bathroom every hour. So I had about 7 or 8 bowel movements and had to hold my nose and run out of the bathroom for things that weren't coming out before. By the way, talk about undigested things. One time I did a colonic on a lady, and out came hundreds, maybe thousands, of little white, little balls, little black ones, and little orange ones. And I had no idea what it was. So she said, what are those? Because, in the colonic viewing room, you have this little clear pipe that you can see what's coming on. And I said, toxins, because I had not a clue what they were. So I ran to Donald Lay, again, my main mentor in this, and said, what were they? He said they were calcium pills, they were iron pills, and they were vitamin C pills. I saw that lady again. She took a whole bunch of them. So then I became very suspicious about vitamins dissolving. And the glycerin tablets that people often take supplements in, they often don't digest. So since then, I have opened every capsule and chew them. Whether it's vitamin E, which is an excellent supplement, chew it. And then you're going to get it in the right place. It will start in the throat and start digesting, actually, or start interacting with the body in the mouth, and then go on down. And it's better to get it in the pill because it keeps it in the capsule, because it keeps it in the air out of it. When you buy a bottle of vitamin E like they do, you rub on your skin, it tends to degrade a lot faster, even in the refrigerator. And this may be a surprise for some people. If you buy vitamin E, you don't keep a vitamin in the refrigerator. They break down faster. You keep them out in a cool, dry place, and then they can last for years that way.
That's a good point. Yeah. Way off topic. I've been playing with oxytocin nasal spray, and you have to keep that refrigerated.
Interesting. Yeah, let's see. I used to know a lot about oxytocin, but I've forgotten these days. So I'll leave that up
for
to you.
Our next sex show, we can dive into it. We'll both do research. I've
All
read
right.
mixed things. Like some people say it's like Ray would probably say it's a stress hormone, but I've also seen so many studies where it shows like it increases testosterone and stuff. So I'm not sure, but
Yeah, it's good to experiment with these things because people get results. My friend Steve Shiver, Dr. Steve Shiver, introduced me to the principle that anything can cause anything and anything can cure anything. So I'm open to when someone tells me they cured something that they had with some weird thing. I'm at least interested because the proof is in the pudding. If the person has cured themselves. Now, one thing that gets complicated here is the mind. Our minds are very powerful, and I've seen people cure themselves with their mind. The placebo effect is well known, and the curative effect is not. Placebo, according to the doctors, mean you think you're cured, your disease is still there, you don't have the symptoms. But actually, you can be cured. I've seen people cured of cancer and just about every disease in the book by belief, by something they thought they took, or finally getting rid of a cognitive trigger event or a trauma. And it just goes away like magic.
I love that. Yeah, my focus, like personally, in the last maybe I don't know 6 months, has just been to lower my stress by every means possible. And I could say I've experienced like a systemic benefit to my body, just being more focused on getting into a parasympathetic state and utilizing coffee correctly. And I feel like coffee's helped with that journey. 'Cause a lot of people will say coffee's sympathetic, right? But you were saying before we started recording that you'll drink coffee with sugar in the middle of the night, right?
And actually, what you want is the sympathetic state. What people don't realize, and that's been an old saw of meditation for years. When I first studied with the Donald Lay, and he would say meditation is the sympathetic state, I would bring experts to see him, and they'd say, that guy doesn't know anything. It's not true. But then if you read a book by a medical doctor and a Zen teacher, I forget the name of the book. It's about that thick. Available now in paper book. I finally got a copy of it. I first found it in a medical library, and he said it's the other way around. And we have something in our body called sympathetic tone. If you don't have it, if you have a person that's in total parasympathetic state, a doctor has to be careful of handling them because an arm can just lob off the gurney or the table, and it can get dislocated. Sympathetic tone is what keeps us moving, where we can stand up. But it gets fight or flight is the only thing. Now, fight or float, right, you can get overstimulated, but they forget that the parasympathetic system can get overstimulated too and cause more diseases even than the other. And actually, to complicate it more, we have 4 nervous systems. We have a parasympathetic, a sympathetic, and enteric nervous system, back to the colon. It mainly regulates the gut. And then we have a skin, a dermalogic system that almost nobody knows about, except I discovered it in the General Electric research that they understood that our skin is an entire another matching system to the sympathetic nervous system. It's what makes us alive. And we get a lot more from vitamin D. We get life energy from the sun.
Wow, that explains why I love, because I use light therapy here because I'm up here in North Idaho and there's not UV and no infrared for 5-6 months, maybe 5 months. And the last time I used my full body blue light, like pulsing at 10 hertz, I was literally twitching. I was like, my body was just like, yes, like I missed this, I need this. So that makes sense that it was actually activating not just my skin, but it was doing something to my nervous system.
Definitely, blue light. Without blue light, circadian rhythms don't exist. So the ideal time to expose yourself to green light is between 11:30 and 12 in the day, and then your rhythms are set at that point. The other set points that we have red light, we don't recognize it because we have something called color compensation. What we see is not what we really see. Just like Louis' tape, we're not hearing what we think we're hearing. At sunset, everything is red around us. The only clue we have is if you look behind, the shadows are green. How can the shadows be green? But we see everything as relative. We see a blue sky, we see a green tree, we see a red flower, we see all of this, but we don't know that that's not really what's going on. That's our eyes making up a fake world. And then if you wait an hour, say you're an hour and a half before sunset, now everything's orange. And then everything is actually yellow. And then at high noon, it goes to green and all the way to blue. But we don't see that. Articles have been written about it, but people don't read those articles. It's been in Scientific American that what we see is not what we see. It's made up. You've probably seen the studies where they put glasses on people and they see upside down. And after a while, they start seeing right side up. The brain starts seeing everything right side up. Then guess what? After a week or so of that, they got used to it. They take the glasses off. And now they see everything upside down. And they have to compensate for a day or two till they can see everything right side up again. So again, what we think we see is not what we see, as everyone for a jury for identifying witnesses in crime scenes see something different. Well, he had a polo shirt on. No, he had a sweatshirt on. No, he had a jacket on. No, he had a red shirt on, a blue one. Goes on and on. We don't really see what we think we're seeing. Beauty
point.
is in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Are there specific colors that benefit the digestive system and the intestine specifically, or would it be the context of like trauma for that person, or a mix?
Definitely there are. And thank you for bringing me back to the subject, because he mounted his horse and rode off in all directions here. Digestion is orange and yellow. That's why so many successful restaurants know to put orange and yellow motifs into their McDonald's. And you see a whole bunch of yellow and orange. It stimulates your gastric tract. Now, Shakey's has a different strategy. They use red, which makes you stop. That's a stop sign. Psychologically and even physiologically, it makes you stick around and drink their beer. They want you to watch the little movie shows and hang around and drink umpteen beers before you leave Shakey's. That's their strategy. Seafood wants you to relax. They're blue. And yet you crave fish under blue light, and you'll crave other foods and meats and vegetables under yellow and green and orange light. So yes, they're very important stimulants for eating, the gastrointestinal tract, and it's used in psychology on people all the time.
Wow, do the orange and yellow increase cravings for cheese? Because I notice I love cheese, and I have like orange and
yeah.
Orange and
That's
red
one of the things. A lot of our favorite foods are orange and yellow when you think about it. Yeah, green isn't really that much of an appetizing, so people always put something in it, like a tomato or something like that. Even in ritual magic, they tell you have a lot of mirrors and a lot of certain colors, but always have a certain amount of red to draw your center to it. And the same thing, the red, the orange, and the yellows, they stimulate our digestion. Also, orange is a sexual stimulant. Ducks and bunnies mate under that color. So you get all fluids going with orange, and you just get the gut fluids going with yellow.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a connection, and I think you've made it before in some of your posts or newsletters, that between sexuality and intestinal motility, right?
You faded out on that one couple of words that went ping ping.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, is there a connection between our sexuality and defecation? Because it's like two different types of release, but they seem to be kind of on opposite ends or something.
It's no accident that the sex tool is the same one as the pee tool. If you think about it, and that they're so closely aligned, and that there's so many erogenous zones in that area. Freud got that right. We go from the back end to the front end as part of our developmental process. He was absolutely right about that. And so there are a lot of sexual stimulants in that particular area. so much that Donald Lay had it he called it the sexual eliminative chakra, number one, and the sexual reproductive chakra, number two. And then, of course, the womb is actually the third chakra, so that's where you grow things. People who wish to make more money, have more physical power, that's the Dantian chakra. That actually creates that. If you see a person who has a lot of money, they have overcome their mother trauma, which is mother with an M, money with an M, McDonald's with an M. You'll find Ray Kroc. Why keep that name? He wanted to make money, so he changed it to an M. M is the key word. People are making money in marijuana now. There's another M, right?
That's really interesting. Wow. One note I made here, kind of circling back, I think this is like 20 minutes ago now, that's fine, that's related to digestion, is stones. And I think this is important to talk about because you mentioned gallstones, which I'm wondering if that's like the primary problem stone when it comes to intestinal motility and digesting your food. But I've been researching there's a big debate right now in the health community. I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of repeaters are pro D supplementation, like D3, like cholecalciferol, vitamin D supplementation. And there's a lot, and I'm on that side for now. I'm always learning, but kind of anti vitamin D supplementation and, getting it from light and not worrying about if it's quote unquote low, which, they actually lowered the bar. I don't know if you've looked like Michael Hollick. He was the one that changed the national lab values for vitamin D. And it used to be like 12. And then they kept raising it and raising the bar. And now it's like normal is like 60 or something crazy. But I know vitamin D supplementation increases calcium in the blood. And then it also has an effect on phosphorus. And I've heard it causes kidney stones. Like supplementing D3 is a primary cause of kidney stones. Any thoughts on all that?
Well, some of the supplements can do that. Sunshine won't do that. And what people often don't know, that vitamin C was first discovered by people going out in the sun or eating food that was out in the sun. And by eating a food exposed to the sun, they got rid of rickets. So it was called anti-rachitic drug or factor 12 years before they discovered vitamin D. And actually, when you get vitamin D in a supplement form, it's an analog. It's a vitamin. It's not the true vitamin D that you get. In fact, it used to be called toxiferol, but that doesn't sell. They call something toxiferol, so they changed its name to calciferol and all the other names they have. And then they added steroid and everything. But you can take your food out in the sun. A classic example is they tell you mushrooms are so full of vitamin D. Well, how did they get it in the dark? A mushroom is so sensitive to sunlight that it has to get it quickly, so farmers can take it out and expose it to direct sunlight for 2 minutes and get all that vitamin D in it. Usually, I think they do it for practical purposes 5 or 10 minutes. But some foods take about a half hour to load with vitamin D, and some take short times, like 2. I've seen charts, comparative, that they used to do it back in the day. They don't do it too much because there's not money in it. To tell people to go out in the sun or put their food out there, there's no money in it, so they don't tell you this. But actually, if you put an animal product in the sun, almost any animal product or oil, you're going to get vitamin D3. If you put any vegetable product out, you're going to get vitamin D2. Both are necessary, and they don't tell you about D4. No one sells D4. It's in the sun. They found about 5 or 6 different vitamins. Where vitamin D got off to a bad start, it was the first vitamin to ever be patented by the University of Wisconsin. And they realized, we have taxpayer money paying for our research, and we'll organize a patent and we'll collect it and not give it to the public. There was an outroar, but now it's common practice. That's how it's done. Universities do the research. We pay for it. The pharmaceuticals say, we paid all this money for the research. No, we did. They leave that fact out. So a drug that is sold for $1,000 a pill, I've seen them, more than $1,000 a pill, They're developed for 5 cents.
That's a good point.
Everything in the periodic table is really easy to put together now with computers. It's so cheap. All they have to do is do the research. And the universities take care of that. Their labs are all phony with their little bunny suits and everything on, looking so cute. It's all done in laboratories. It's done at UCSB here. It's done in University of Texas. It's done everywhere. Yeah, and we pay for it, and we don't get a bit of it, except the diseases that all those pharmaceutical products cause. But many supplements can be useful, particularly if a person insists on eating a McDonald's and they're not going to know much about nutrition or circadian nutrition. Then they better have a backup plan, frankly.
Right.
So I'm certainly not against supplementation. I worked in the industry I managed one health food store for only 1 week, my first experience. I wasn't getting paid enough, so I quit that one really quickly. Then I worked in another health food store for 8 years. And then I worked in another one for, what's my third one? A matter of months or a year or something like that. And another one for a matter of months. And then one in Hawaii for a couple of months as well, managing their supplement department. So, and I'd studied supplements before that. You know, when I was in high school, junior high, I was already studying supplements and taking vitamin C and having the little strips that measure your urine, not knowing that that's not how you measure pH. But it's sold to everybody that you can tell your pH by either your saliva or your urine. Absolutely false.
How long do you have to expose potatoes to light?
But I thought that at that time, and my roommate would go and tell all his girlfriends and everybody, my roommate measures his urine before he's peeing.
That's funny. I was curious with potatoes, how long do you have to expose those? Are they similar to mushrooms, or just a couple minutes to sunlight for them to make vitamin D?
They're probably a little longer. Carbohydrates generally take a little longer, but they do it. Even pasta, a dead food can get, and a cooked food can get it in. I may have told the story of the Italian community that moved into New York. They moved in there and they hung their pasta on clotheslines in the sun. Well, then came the tenements and the buildings, and they had to move in these buildings. So they hung them on the railings of the balconies. And guess what? They passed an ordinance. You can't do that. It's against the law. It looks terrible to have pasta hanging off of the apartment buildings and the brownstones. So, but then they all started getting sick because it had been exposed to the sun before. So then the Italian community would send away to Italy for their pasta. They wouldn't make it anymore because they knew it was making them sick. They had common sense back then, and this was like in the 1920s they figured that out. Research was done to show indeed at that time that you get energy and life force, and a lot of times they didn't know exactly what it was. It was before vitamin D was even discovered, but they knew you had a variety of ingredients that go into food from the sun. Now, if you're worried about flies getting on your food when you do that, saran wrap will pass the correct frequencies for making vitamin D. Plastic won't. Glass won't. They won't pass it. You can't get a bit of vitamin D or most of the things, important things in the sun by standing in front of a window or a plastic shield or your car window. But once you're exposed, you can even get it in the shade. Because shade, an ultraviolet ray is refractive, it bounces. Vitamin D doesn't. It goes direct like a laser. All of the other colors go otherwise. That's why red was so easy to make as a laser. Green is a more potent laser, but it took them a while to get that. You ever handle a green laser? They're awesome.
I haven't. It sounds awesome.
Hey, one time, they go way into the sky. So a good friend of mine, I used to go up to the Jim and Von Harding up into their boat on Lake Powell. And he had one of those lasers, but he had sense enough not just to shoot it around every place. Well, he gave it to a high school kid, a friend of his daughter, and he shot it up in the air toward a plane. Well, he grabbed it out of his hand, but within an hour, we had airplanes circling the area trying to find whoever had that laser down there, because it's dangerous. You could blind a pilot way in space. And unlike a red laser where you just see the point of contact and the point of leaving it, the green laser is like Star Wars. It's like a big sword going thousands of feet into the air or any place. Illuminate a hillside, you see this ray. They are really impressive. I think they're illegal in this country now.
Maybe you'll signal some extraterrestrials down, so the sulfur-based beings. Not the iron ones. I wanted to ask you about animal-based foods versus plant foods, because I think you've seen it too. There's this, I'm kind of anti-diet. I think you're in the same camp where, it's not vegan or carnivore. It's like a balance and context. And there's like a big debate where, the vegan camp is saying, plant-based fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds are the best thing for the body, not just the digestion, but everything. And the carnivore people saying the anti-nutrients are killing you and wrecking your gut, right? Because everyone wants to blame that specifically. And that's why the vegans go extreme carnivore and only raw meat. And that's, it's lectins, oxalates, phytates. But it's more of finding that balance, right? A little bit of animal foods, a little bit of plant foods, because they each do different things to the intestinal tract. Do I have that right?
That's my understanding of it. Now, due to survival rates, obviously an Eskimo is going to eat a lot more meat foods than in tropical places where you have fruit there. So there is no real Neanderthal diet or Paleolithic diet because it's different all over. We happen to be omnivores. I mean, if you look at the Mr. Eats-All, he ate airplanes and digested a lot of that metal. How the heck did he do that? I don't advise most people to do it. My son used to have a friend that would eat liquor bottles. He'd drink the booze and then eat the bottle. And God knows how he did it. He was a bit crazy, but he could do it. His thing was to go into a bar. Someone would give him the stink eye, and he would order a bottle, a half pint of bourbon or whatever, and chug-a-lug it, and then eat the bottle and look at the guy that was giving him the stink eye. And it avoided a lot of fights. But it seemed to be okay. My son lost track of him, but he was an amazing character. And how do you explain that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. With alcohol, I've heard it stops digestion, because I've heard mixed things, like it helps digestion, and then some people say because it's, 7 calories per gram, I think it stops it. What are your thoughts on alcohol with food and digestion in general?
At one time I was in the camp of that it helps digestion, but then I found that Dr. William Beaumont, he found a man that was shot with a musket, had a big hole in his abdomen and partly in his lungs. So he healed him up. They thought the guy was going to die, but he lived, but he had an open hole in his abdomen. So Dr. Beaumont, a military surgeon, spent about 11 years measuring everything and digesting everything and seeing how long it would last in the stomach, experimenting with everything. And really remarkable results. So alcohol, he found, pretty much retarded digestion, as did Dr. Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg. So I think it helps in certain ways, though, that we don't know about hormones and things that are unknown. I take a little bit of tequila and pineapple juice at night as kind of a tonic. And I've actually told people to take that the couple couldn't get pregnant, and they got pregnant by doing that because of its hormonal response. So I think a little bit of alcohol now, then, and again, in time particularly, can make a difference. And it can even heal. On the History Channel, they had 2 bootleggers. They had the equivalent of cigarette boats. They could take their booze back and forth. And this was back during the Depression. Well, the revenuers, whoever they were, whatever government organization it was, they came with guns and machine guns and blasted the heck out of the boat. These 2 guys thought they were done. They were dead. So they managed to hide the boat and get away, and they went up to a friend's house, and they just figured, let's drink ourselves to death. Well, they drank gin, and it cured both of them. One particularly was supposed to be, he thought he was for sure he was dead. The other one was a little more problematical. So for a while, I told people, for your kidneys, drink some gin, which has a touch of juniper at kidney time from 5 to 7 in the evening. So alcohols can have very therapeutic effects, and if you take too much of them with your meal, though, it will definitely interfere with digestion.
Wow. Yeah, the tequila with pineapple juice.
By the way, another thing
awesome.
that's amazing, and you can actually gain weight this way, if you take cold liquids, they can inhibit your stomach digestion for 45 minutes before you slow it down that much, 45, 50 minutes. And now, that was one way that Adonalay had me gain weight, because actually you tend to get gas pressure, and even muscle is mostly gas. So you can bloat yourself up. Look at, what was the name of that guy that was a weeder man? And then he worked with the, I can't think of the other guy that did all the machinery. And he gained 72 pounds in a month, I believe, which is supposed to be physiologically impossible. But then something amazing happened. He got trim and won, I think, Mr. America, Casey Viator. Look him up, Casey Viator, Viator. Well, if you read the Weeder magazines, in 3 days, he went on an eating binge after winning that contest and gained 75 pounds. Now, that's impossible, but he did it. And indeed, we gain weight by bloat. I myself have gained 10 pounds under stress overnight. And then, mistaking that it was my metabolism, I started to stuff myself with food at 3 times more calories than I would normally have, all kinds of oily foods and everything. And to my amazement, I lost the 10 pounds in the entire week that I gained. And I gained 10 pounds. And I've seen it in other people, particularly in stressful situations. I see people, Ray Pete says, he contradicts himself on this one point. Drink low-fat milk because you'll gain weight on the high-fat. Yet, when he went to Russia and people weren't drinking meat, he goes over to Denmark, I believe it was, and they're drinking all this meat. And they're all slim and muscular. Well, I drank 2 quarts of milk, often half and half, for decades, and couldn't put on any weight. I ate cheese sandwiches, I stuffed myself, couldn't gain weight. And only when I started working out at the gym, then I started gaining weight. And finally, my proudest moment, when someone came up to me and said, "Are you on steroids?" And I said, "No," but I kind of swaggered out of the gym. When I don't work out, I get so skinny, if I turn sideways and stick out my tongue, people think I'm a zipper. I've seen more meat in a 5-cent taco. But if I go to the gym, I put on the weight.
That's awesome.
And some of that is solar nutrition, because if you eat things on time, your body will regulate all of that. However, for whatever reasons, it doesn't work for everybody. I've seen people go as solar as I am, eating certain foods at certain times of the day. Specifically, I've been doing it since 1975, but they don't lose any weight until they address the underlying traumas or often a gallbladder problem. A clogged gallbladder can hold weight, and then you need to do some of these purges we talk about, either milder ones with grapefruit or extreme ones with olive oil. And there are ones with the ones you were describing with the Epsom salt and all that. I have no experience with that, but I have a lot of experience with the one with the olive oil and the corn oil and the apple juice and the tomato juice.
So how would one clear the gallbladder in an easy way that's gentle?
One way is to work the reflexes on it in the foot in reflexology, and also work behind the knee where there's important points, and also working the meridian, which are at the bottom of the toes that you can work. In fact, if a person's nauseous and going to throw up, what you do is you rub the second toe, the second toe from the pinky toe, and you rub it. And then 2 things will happen. You will either puke or it will settle. That toe works every time. I've experimented with it. Yeah. I was on a boat in Hawaii with someone that got seasick. So I just rubbed that toe, and it settled. Many times they throw up, but then they settle their stomach anyway because they should have thrown up. That's an amazing point, a gallbladder point at the end. They call the points at the end of the toes, let's see, what are they? Well, the name escapes me. Akabani points. Akabani points is what they call them in Japan. And they're very powerful. You have one on your thumb, one on your index finger, circulates some sex, triple heater meridian, and you have both the heart and the stomach on the pinky and the lung meridian here. And so if you want to work on your colon, by the way, right here is the index finger, the one we point with. And people with colon problems all sometimes have dogmatic attitudes, like one way. Have you ever seen that gesture? One way, and it shows it's one of these born-again Christian signs sometimes. And people, when they make their point, they point like that. Now, you listen to me. They don't go, you would think it's weird. Now, you listen to me. You listen to me what they're thinking. But they go it like that, and you know exactly what they mean. Body language people say, don't do that on a lecture platform because people will think you're a butt. So, but anyway, you can work the end of that finger and go to the bathroom. If you want to actually, two ways for the colon. This is often misunderstood. Say you have diarrhea or constipation. With a person with diarrhea, they say to, let me think how they work this. Yeah, the energy of the colon goes in life flow. They want to back it up, so turn it the other way. But actually, you don't want to do that. Then the diarrhea stays inside you. You have diarrhea to get rid of it. So what you do is, if a person with diarrhea, they work the right side of their body and in the ascending colon, and that's called the water colon. And by regulating that side of the body, even going up it with your hand, just up it alone, and not going down on the other side, will automatically cause the water to absorb and the toxins to be cleared. And then you get rid of diarrhea. The other day, you might as well put a plug in your anus to clear diarrhea. And that's not a good idea. Now, for constipation, you can go both sides. You go down on the left, up on the right. You'll notice that our circulatory system and our so-called cosmodyne energy works in a clockwise direction. We have a clockwise heart. It goes down the blood flow and up on the other side. Our colon works the same way. Some people rarely are born the other way. And actually, it's a disadvantage to be south of the equator, where life didn't start, because you're in magnetic flow all the time. And that's why you have so many psychics down there, and also a lot of traumas, and no major languages being developed out of that area south of the equator, because the top half of the planet, if we go by up and down, there is no up and down, but if we do, north of the equator is where your languages and big brain development started.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Strengths, too. You'll notice how the northern country almost always wins over the southern country, whether it's in the American Civil War or other wars. Look at Hitler trying to get into Russia. Look at Napoleon trying to get into Russia. And what we don't hear that about 30 other conquerors tried to go for Russia, but they had magnetics working for them. They had the North Pole.
Wow. Adam, is it all right if we jump into questions? Because I think I have probably like 80 questions
here.
Yeah,
sure. Let's do it.
Okay. This was a good one. Does poop
dive into it?
Have a specific shape or smell?
It does what?
Oh, does poop or should poop have a specific shape or smell? Because isn't there like the Bristol stool chart and all these different things?
Wait, soup? Is that the word soup?
Oh, poop or feces.
Oh, poop. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yeah. Now let's go into shape of poop. Now that's my speciality. Ideally, and again, some people it changes by the diet. but it should be well formed, and it shouldn't have too much of an odor. And in a healthy person, some people can have actually, and I've been at that point, as much as an 18-inch bowel movement, unbroken, come right out. It's like peeling an apple where you peel the whole thing off. But you can have shorter bathroom bowel movements. But generally, it's better if you have a well-formed one, and it neither floats to the top or sinks to the bottom. If you drink nothing but dairy, watch them drop right to the bottom. In fact, people who drink too much dairy or at the wrong time, they will get, it will lock up in their rectum. A long time ago when I drank a lot of milk, one time I had to dig my poop out of my anus from what they call milk stool. So your stool can actually be an indication about how much dairy you're getting. If you get really hard lumps, and they'll be formed as separate lumps forming a hard lump, then you're getting too much, so you back off a little. I've done really well with dairy. Like I say, I've done tons of it, and seems to be okay. You know, I finally made the big 80 revolutions around the sun here recently. So
that's right. Yeah, happy birthday. It's awesome. How can I fix occasional constipation? A bunch of people are wondering that. You already gave one tip with the index finger. Anything else?
Yeah, actually, that's one of them. The other one is called large intestine 4, which is both a reflex point and an acupuncture point. They both coincide in this case. And it's right in the webbing of the hand. Between the thumb and the index finger, you go down to where they join, and it works in there. And you massage that. Particularly for constipation, you want to work the left side more. And it's always good to start with the left side and work with the right side. You can do it more. In fact, recently, I forget what happened. Oh, yeah, it was an emotional trauma very recently. And my bowels usually work 4 or 5 times a day. Well, I didn't go to the bathroom all day. And Vibrant Gal here reminded me, what about that point? So I felt it, and it was really sore. I said, wow. So I worked it. Then I went to the bathroom. And then I went back, and it wasn't sore anymore. So that L4 is an important point. It's both a reflex point and an acupuncture point. Large intestine 4 as a reflex point, by the way. Acupuncture points tend to sedate. They activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Reflex points, when used properly, tend to activate the sympathetic nervous system. You get the best of both worlds. Think of those points. What's the difference between an acupuncture point and a reflex point? An acupuncture point is like a tornado. It goes counterclockwise and limited, like a mosquito. What is a high-pressure system? It goes clockwise, you notice, and the weather system. When they turn counterclockwise, they're tornadoes, hurricanes, things like that. Eye of a tornado. So it basically, if you're doing acupuncture, it's the mosquito technique. If you're doing reflexology, it's the fly technique. Ever feel what a fly feels when they walk on your skin? How they activate your skin and enliven it? So it's a fly technique. So when you tickle a point or pinch it or pull it, you get more results out of a reflex point, which is sometimes as big as a nickel, while an acupuncture point can only be as big as a BB. Big difference. Anyway, for constipation, the other thing is along the sides of your legs you have the fascia lata muscles. And they're long muscles, almost like bands into the muscles along the outer thighs. You simply rub them really hard, and then reach behind your back. And when you reach behind your back, you activate it. And I've had a person that couldn't go to the bathroom for 5 days, and they had to excuse themselves from the, actually I work on the floor, so I can't say a table. I got used to like shiatsu, work on the floor. She had to get up and run to the bathroom to go to the bathroom. It's so effective. Just working the fascia lata. The other muscle is the wiggle muscle. Notice how women their hips work differently, they actually have an advantage for going to the bathroom because that jiggles the contents of the stomach when they take a walk after eating, and it also activates the colon. Most people, if they feel behind their back, this is something interesting. Take a little oil on your hands, olive oil, and rub right above the hip bones. Many people will find BBs in there. It's calcified lymph glands. Some of them will have about 30 of them, and they will be as big as large marbles or large ball bearings. Those interfere with digestion, and that point, those reflex points are common to the large intestine, the circulation sex meridian, and the small intestine meridian. So a lot of people's sex lives and poop lives are compromised by those there, and all they have to do is rub them till those points go away. Some people gouge them out, which I'm more conservative. You just keep rubbing them till they go away gently, and that takes a while. And you could do it yourself or have your partner just rub your back every once in a while until they're dissolved. And then all three meridians, large intestine, small intestine, most of your entire gut, and your circulation sex meridian are taken care of. Those points relate to your index finger, large intestine, pinky finger, small intestine, and circulation sex middle finger. It's really interesting how that works.
Wow. This is a good one. Mucus in the stool. I know there's a big mucusless diet thing that's making a resurgence. Why is there so much mucus in the stool? What causes it, and how to fix it?
You don't want to fix it. In fact, you've heard of Gypsy Boots, haven't you?
From you.
He was actually an acquaintance of mine, a remarkable man, but he would say, some of you skinny people could use a little mucus. Yeah, it says, by the way, mucus-less diet, because mucus is like the cops coming to arrest the mugger, and then they get blamed for the crime. Every time there's a mugging, a policeman shows up. They must be guilty of the crime. And actually, what about the mugger? Well, they forget about the mugger. What is happening in your colon, what foods you're eating that requires all that extra mucus that comes out. What comes out of our nose and our ears, and excess earwax is a type of mucus. So mucus is important. If your stool is formed with it, no big problem. Though a healthy person would probably have 5% of dietary fiber come out of their bowels, and about 40% of either the mucus or the dead bacteria. That's perfectly normal. We have an ecology going on in our colon, and actually the appendix is the regulator of it. The cecum is a second stomach, unrecognized by modern science, but you'll find it in Turd Eye. The whole ecology of it's like the ecology of our planet is right in the gut. And it goes from the time from your mouth, your oral cavity, to your anal cavity is all part of the journey. And so mucus is okay, but if you're having, if it's a hindrance, where you're having a problem, physical problem, pain, and mucus coming out of the nose and overspilling the rest of the body, then it's a problem. But if people just tell you that's mucus in your stool, you're probably very healthy. If out of your neck, by the way, this might be important, out of your mouth or your nose. If you blow your nose, a healthy person has clear mucus. It should be transparent. You have a slight problem, it's white. You have a greater problem, it's yellow. You have a greater problem, green. And if your mucus is coming out brown, you have a serious problem. You better do something about it. Or go to a specialist if you don't know enough how to handle it yourself. Brown is a serious infection, and green is serious, but usually you can back that off with garlic, sugar, a whole bunch of other things, and be curative.
That's really interesting. That's a cool self-diagnosis. Hemorrhoids. And I get this question a lot. It seems to be like another epidemic, like hemorrhoids and how to take care of those things.
Hemorrhoids, yes. Supposedly Napoleon lost the Battle of Waterloo over hemorrhoids. It's not true, but it is a fiction and it could happen. And another person afflicted with it was Martin Luther. A lot of people have had problems, and I got mine in an interesting way at one point. I wrote during the hippie days. I wrote Richard Nixon on my draft. I signed up for my draft card, but I said, I wish Nixon would get a case of hemorrhoids, and I got one. So we have a mental thing, and the second time, then they went away. But the second time, I had an ex-girlfriend, and she got married to someone else. Very jealous guy. So I just happened to see her in the restaurant, and I went in, and I said, hi. And so she looks out the window, and sure enough, her husband drives up, thinking we're meeting at the restaurant. So I got so mad seeing him out there berating her in the car and lecturing her and accusing her that I walked out, and I said, if anyone, I had him roll down the window, and then I said, if anyone tells you you're a bleep, you believe them. And so then I went and kicked a post and felt something give way. And so then I had anal fissures for a while and was treating them with sitz bath and everything. The real cause, physiological cause of hemorrhoids is the portal system. It's a liver problem. So I got rid of them finally by cleaning up my liver. And when you clean up your liver, then they'll go away because the portal system is intimately associated. That's why people take coffee enemas, so they can get up into the liver system indirectly, because the liver gets, poisons rotate between the colon and the liver until they get taken care of. And every time, if you can get it out in one bowel movement, then you don't build up the toxic products, including tryptophan, indoles, scatols, cadaverines. All these poisons build up in the colon. So it's wise to have 3 bowel movements a day. You can be healthy with one, but when a doctor tells you, oh, it's normal to have one every 2 or 3 days, I don't believe them. Out in nature, there's a lot of animals have 10 or 15 bowel movements a day, depending on, some have 50, but that would be too much for a human being, definitely.
You wouldn't be able to get anything done.
Yeah, more time pooping. One thing that Adonai stressed, he said it's better to be lucky than smart, though. So he said the important thing is, like a caterpillar, know how to eat the foods, and then you will evolve, including your brain, into that without any thinking about it. And if you notice, how many people evolve by school and how many people evolve by accident? Look at these people like the case of the piano player. They got this so-called retarded child, and they figured, well, we'll play some music. So they played Bach or Beethoven. So they went to bed, and the wife said to the husband, did you leave the recording on? No, I didn't. So they went out there, and the kid, I crawled up on the piano, and note for note was playing the music. And then he went out to perform because he could just look at it. A lot of great composers, Mozart and things, they could see the whole symphony in their head and then just write it down really quickly. It's been done with famous poems, too, under opium and sometimes just under creativity. Also, there was an artist, a boy who they gave him some clay to work on therapeutically. He made perfect structures and was selling his sculptures of clay for $150,000 in art museums. And look at the recent case in Denver. A guy is just a regular guy. He jumps in the swimming pool. Unfortunately, there was no water in the pool, so he had a slight problem and a concussion. When he wakes up, he's a genius. He can do all kinds of mathematical problems to the nth degree and the square root of this and the square root of that. That also happened to someone else recently who was beat up by a gang and then ended up with the same abilities. So what is intelligence that we can get it? According to Adonai, intelligence is in the air. All you have to do is have a tuner, like a variable capacitor on a radio, and tune it in. Why use a tape recorder when we have every radio station in the universe available for us? And he certainly could do that and proved it many times.
Wow. This is a question.
Adonai dropped out of school in kindergarten, by the way, his first day. Said, they can't teach me
Wow.
what I want to know. So his father said, well, then go to work. And he did.
That's so awesome. So parasites, this is a really good one because I used to be obsessed. I think this is the reason why I was fruitarian and vegan, raw vegan for so many years. I had chopsticks and tweezers going on in the toilet, and I had my vials, freaked my parents out, and I was just obsessed with like capturing these critters. And it was actually like a month ago or so, my cat, I saw white worms crawling around her anus, and I later found out it was a species of tapeworm called tinea. I guess that's like a common tinea something, but they can get it from eating infected rodents, which there are here in my house. So,
Wow.
yeah, just your thoughts on parasite cleansing, because I know there's probably a balance where it's not everything to like keep cleansing constantly, but it seems like a real issue, right?
It is a real issue. In fact, about 85% of people have some kind of a parasitic organism in them. Our very mitochondria was a parasite originally. At least it's a dominant theory. Probably 95% of people believe that, and there's a lot of evidence. It just showed up one day, and now we can't move a muscle without the mitochondria. Other parts of our body, Dr. Koch, he said that cancer was an incipient organ, that eventually it will give us superpowers, but we treat it as a disease instead of letting it do what it can. Adonale said the same thing. Bilocation, all these things are a product of cancer. Now, there's a lot of evidence toward that, even though it sounds really woo-woo, but there is evidence toward that. Parasites, I prefer the method of Samuel Hahnemann, the homeopathist. He basically, back in 1801 or so, realized that heroic medicine, or purging, either through the mouth, emetics, purgatives, whatever it was, either to make you sweat, to make you let blood out, let stool out, let urine out, let this out, diuretics, all that kind of stuff, wasn't working. That it just was symptomatic, and you actually caused damage to your body rather than to the parasite, even though some parasites would come out, but they'd be winning the war because they could multiply. And so he recommended homeopathy, or at least cleaning up the gut and making the environment where it was so healthy, they had nothing to feed on. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think purges can help. Certain things, they're unpleasant. They don't like. Garlic is one. I don't know if you've heard this one, and I've heard people swear it's the truth, that if you take garlic in your mouth and then put a bowl of warm milk at your butt and just lie down, that a tapeworm will come out for the milk and actually come out of the anus to get the milk. Well, obviously there's things that tapeworms don't like. One of them is there's an inside of a walnut hull, they call it, not the shell, but the hull. They often sell it. That can work. Tequila is an excellent parasite remedy. And let me think what else is. I'll think of the third thing in a while. But tequila and pineapple juice at night with aloe vera will actually get rid of tequilas. Get rid of parasites. And you drink enough for your brain's sake, for your body's sake, not your brain's sake. All you need is a shot glass. To get rid of a tapeworm and some other parasites, though, you must do it for 28 days. If you'll notice, many parasites are on a lunar cycle. They actually follow it. Columbus, when he discovered this country, the beach, the water lit up because certain animals mate only at one time. So these luminous animals came to the surface and told him, hey, there's land nearby. So he knew before he spotted the land. Here in California, we have the grunion runs. You're probably familiar with that, being from California too at one point. The grunion, they come at the time of the moon. Well, parasites follow the same type of pattern. So to do that, you pick a particular time of day and you do it consistently for 30 days to make sure Then you kill the parasite, the eggs, and reduce the amount of infection. And usually those things kind of work. If it's a really serious point, then I'd go Ray Pete's route. Get an antibiotic at that point, and then clean up the mess that the antibiotic makes if the parasite's bad. I'll tell you a story that happened to a friend of mine in El Paso. She calls me up and she says, "Hey, I'm Mexican, and they told me that I have Crohn's disease. How can that be?" Because it pretty much happens in the Middle East. It's used to be more common now. So I called up my mentor, Adam Haley, and said, she's got Crohn's disease. And he said, "Nope, she's got pinworms in her cecum." So I hung up and I looked it up. It said they can go into the heart. So I called him up again. They can go into the heart, Adam. Is that going to be serious? He said, "No, they're not interested in her heart." So anyway, she goes to the doctor. It's pinworms. And so they give her an antibiotic and she's fine. All of her symptoms, and she had numerous symptoms, went away. But for people who don't want to do that and they want to first experiment, I would even advise, and I'm going to do this generally. I'm not going to recommend it as a cure for anything because you get in trouble giving a medical diagnosis. But as a general rule, and I've done it that way, I take some walnut hulls in the morning, 3 capsules. I break them open and I put them in my juice. And then midday, what did I take at the midday? That's what's missing. At nighttime, it's tequila and pineapple juice. I hope before the show ends, I'll think of what I took at the midday because it was something I took at the midday, and it's just blank right now. And I've done it so many times. Out to lunch.
Maybe some fruit. I think I might have asked you in a previous show, but tobacco. A lot of my guests, I bring up that I enjoy cigars here and there, and I never ever do it daily. But I mean, the Farmer's Almanac, they used to give tobacco leaves to like pigs, swine, as a purgative, and I think it's the nicotine that's a pesticide and an insecticide. Have you looked into like tobacco's effects? And it's my understanding smoking it even is an antiparasitic. That's my current belief.
My first introduction to nicotine was from R.J. Reynolds himself of the tobacco company. He was a Sufi. I did Sufi work with him at his the Reynolds family estate in North Carolina, and spent a month up there and got to know him. He died of lung cancer from smoking, by the way, and ended up dying at the Sufi camp in Torreon, New Mexico. But he told me as a child, if you got a bee sting, put tobacco on it. Pain goes away just like that. So as a medicine, it's good to take, despite them saying, oh, the tobacco's okay, it's the additives and all of that. There's some truth in that, but the tobacco itself is a poison because nicotine is, many people who watch CSI, either the Las Vegas version or the other, they come across nicotine as being the gardener's poison of choice. That is deadly. Fortunately, in tobacco, you have a very tiny amount of it, so it can be actually stimulative, and it can actually keep you from getting Alzheimer's disease. But at a price, it's called lung cancer, COPD, all these different syndromes you get off of it. So I don't recommend it. However, as a tonic, maybe once a month, you smoke it, 1 cigarette, and that's it, once a month at the time of the full moon. And it can actually be therapeutic for people. I've done that myself to experiment, while coughing a lot, of course, while I was doing it. So anything, can be used as a medicine in certain ways. And cigarettes, they can be used as a medicine.
I like that, yeah. And I think there's something to be said about cigars versus tobacco versus cigarettes. Usually the cigarettes, even American Spirit, they put some questionable stuff in there.
Yeah, I think cigars are purer. Even during the Cuban crisis, JFK managed to get his cigars from Cuba. The rest of us could go to prison, but he got them anyway. So there's a whole other thing goes on that we're not privileged to, obviously.
This is a good subject, leaky gut. And I think a few people asked, just healing? How long does it take? That's I noticed there's from my research there's different things that kind of punch holes in the gut. I don't know if that's a simplistic way of saying it, but glyphosate and certain things will like poke holes in the intestinal tract. So like undigested food particles seep into the bloodstream. Is that real? Or?
They do, and that's very important to not have that. See, when you go into the capillary system, you're going into the blood system. Endotoxins aren't that toxic in the colon. They can cause colic and things like that, but they mainly cause problems in the blood. It's called sepsis and very dangerous. So the medical profession doesn't really care about the endotoxins in your gut. They should. Ray Pete does. But when they get in your blood, then it's called sepsis and you're dying often. Back in the day, how did they treat sepsis? They heated the human body, and this is going to sound unbelievable to your audience. It did to me when I first heard it. They heat the human body to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, how did they do that without killing them? Number one, they keep the head out. They put the rest of the body, and they treat it to dry heat, because a person can't be sweating, because you'll boil the skin. And they treat it very briefly. But that high heat therapy actually would cure sepsis, which nothing else was doing. Because back then, sepsis, that's called death. Is all it might as well just call it death and get it over with. People died. But they saved people back then, and it was being done in 1910 and 12, and now it's brought back as pyrotherapy, but it's really wimpy. Supply a little more heat, run the blood through some heat or something. That's not enough heat to do it. But back then, how could they do that back then? I've gone in medical books and seen the illustrations of people in these machines in an osteopathic library in Fort Worth, Texas. So it existed. But anyway, leaky gut is caused by being too alkaline, strangely enough. Acidity builds muscle tissue structure. Alkalinity breaks us down. Now, why would we want to break down? Well, imagine if all of your cells stayed alive. It'd be a traffic jam. They have to be, catabolism breaks them down and builds them up. And so we need to break it down. But too much breaking down, you get leaky gut syndrome, leaky lung syndrome, leaky liver syndrome, leaky heart syndrome, all of that. And of course, one way to get leaky gut, omega-3 fatty acids. God, we almost got through a whole show without me mentioning yellow fat disease. How can that be?
Yeah, because
they're a major cause of leaky gut syndrome.
Because the lipophuscin
iron doesn't do very well for the gut either, by the way.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think people don't understand, like lipophuscin that you've written like 11 books on now, at least, like that accumulates everywhere, right? Including the intestine.
12.
12, wow.
That what?
Oh, it accumulates everywhere. Like lipophuscin, I mean, it hits the brain, right, and causes Alzheimer's, dementia, but it'll also kind of coat the intestines.
You know, it causes just about everything. And because I have to stop someplace. I stopped at the 12th book to control myself from going on. Because since then, I've found so many syndromes, like Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is actually brown bowel syndrome, which they call it that until it gets to a certain place. Then it's Crohn's disease. It's yellow fat disease. Brown bowel syndrome is another word for yellow fat disease. If you go into Alzheimer's, muscular dystrophy, muscular sclerosis, mixed dementia, regular dementia, old age dementia, all of these, they're yellow fat disease. Basically, we get accumulated with a bunch of junk that is living. It doesn't just stand there in a corner like in a crowded building, but it actually is aggressive. It's more like living things that come and bite your ankles while you're on the computer. It just doesn't sit there passively. And many times, a person that makes 100, they have as much as 75 to 80 to 90% lipophuscin in their cells. That's a lot. There's not much space in that cell to do any mitochondrial work or energy production or DNA, whatever. It's all compromised. So it's a major cause of disease. And I could go on and on. Since then, I've found so much research, and I have to tell Vibrant Gal, okay, control me now. Don't let me write this down. Don't let me start another book, please. But yeah, it's a major thing. And 3 of the 7 deadly sins of aging what's his name now? I don't even think of his name. He's
Aubrey de Grey.
Yes, Aubrey de Grey. Thank you. The Aubrey de Grey wrote the 7 deadly sins of aging. It's 3 of them. 2 of them, common sense, the lippfuscin outside the cell and inside the cell, but the so-called sugar, the age-generated pigments, caramelization, basically, it turns out to be lippfuscin. Not that at all. It's been misnamed so they can blame sugar. Glycation, oh boy, the sugar. They've been talking about sugar gives you cancer, which it certainly does not. In fact, Ray Peat talks of cases of being cured of cancer by sugar.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because it took me like 8 years to get to this place or 8 or 9 years of not being afraid of sugar. And going back to what you said about the liver, like hemorrhoids, you said it's a liver problem. Because my theory is that a lot of the benefits to sugar is that it's feeding the liver, which then could clean the blood and deactivate poisons. And like it's really liver support, right, when we're talking about sugar.
You know, the liver is such an underrated organ. It does over 500 things in textbooks, and I have no idea what about 300 of those are that it does, you know. It has to be a liver specialist to know. But it's such a remarkable organ that you can lose 20%, you can be down to 20% of it, and it will regrow. But it will regrow to its exact size. And they've even experimented by having one liver be shared with 2 animals, and it grows back to the size to, these are cruel experiments, but then it shares both animals. It has a set point that you can't grow it any larger. Well, there's a case, I personally know somebody who had a child in the hospital with 1% liver function. So they were keeping her alive in other methods. And they said, there's no way. 20%, there have been cases, but she either gets a new liver or she dies. Well, her father and her had a reconciliation. Lots of crying, and her liver grew back, and she was out jogging a month later with no liver transplant. I haven't heard. I think she's still alive and feisty, and that happened, 15 years ago or so. So the liver, again, it's a miracle organ. It's very much like a placenta. It has no real shape. People talk about the liver looks like this, has so many lobes. No, it can have 5, it can have 7, it can have 2, it can have multiple lobes. It's pretty much anything it wants to do.
That's awesome. It's a shapeshifter. This is a good one. Does socializing improve your stool and intestinal function? Like going out and talking to people? Yes.
So you're socializing with people. Yeah, they're messing with people's bowels by keeping people separate. Again, I won't go into that subject, but when people don't have connections with people, they tend to get sick in a variety of ways, and it definitely will affect the colon. The colon is one of the first things to be affected, and that's why when they started investigating psychosomatic syndromes, that was easy. They could see it quite quickly. The skin and the colon were the 2 most things. Hypnotists could actually hypnotize a person and get acne on their chest to write their name on it with hypnosis, and then hypnotize it to go away. So obviously skin and colon both have that capacity. You can give a person colitis and take it away with hypnotism and mesmerism. It's been done for centuries, and doctors don't want you to know that. Oh, no.
That's it.
By the way, there's a definition. Psychological means you think you have a disease and you have all the symptoms, but you don't really have a disease. Those are easy to cure. Psychosomatic means your mind gives you the disease. It's a physical disease. If you let that last too long, it takes more mind power to get rid of it. If it's first started, that's why I know people have gotten rid of cancer by just changing their attitude or finding out who is the matter with them. because it's often who is the matter with us. Very few people have a problem with an it. Like how many people do you know? I slipped on the third step of my house, and I don't care if it takes the rest of my life, I'm going to get even with that third step. But I see people say the same thing about their boss, their ex-spouse, their mother, their father. Years later, they're still mad at them, and I cannot forgive that person. But not astute.
That's a really good
or even
point.
an
So
animal.
holding on.
Well, usually, I take that back, but they project on it. Captain Ahab lost his left leg because it was to Moby Dick, not to Moby Jane, but Moby Dick. And Boomer, one of the whalers, he lost his left arm to the whale too, his left arm, and Ahab had a peg leg because it was a male trauma. So we don't acknowledge usually that you have a male trauma, it's on the left side of your body, and a female on the right side. In fact, psychology wants to reverse it, and polarity therapy wants to reverse it. But anyone who experiments with mind hacking will find out it's just like I'm telling you, it's a left and right.
Wow. Do you think holding on to any emotion can cause intestinal issues, or is it specific ones like anger or grief or fear? Because I know those all affect different, like I think fear's the lungs and anger's the liver.
Yeah, it has to do with holding on. And it's interesting, this ties in with that question. What about social distancing? Do you know the ability to be alone is what the colon represents? They used to pick astronauts by the size of their colon. They knew that a person with a larger colon had more of a capacity to be alone in space. I mean, imagine being up there for a year with only two people. You talk about being locked in with your relatives or something like that. People you don't even know, have different habits. So yeah, it's the ability from loneliness. I've also found it's moving traumas. If a person, in fact, my one day of constipation had to do with transportation. I'm not going into my specific trauma, but it had to do with the ability to go someplace that I couldn't go to for legal reasons. And so it bothered me so much that for a whole day, I was constipated for one day. Automatically leaving. I'm still here. Yep. Okay, we're back. They're giving little notices. Figure we're overdoing it or something. But anyway, moving traumas. The other one is attachment traumas. Freud called this, what did he call it? He attributed it rightly gold with feces. They used to call it gold and feces. So people who accumulate money and have to hold on to it and can't let go of it often have constipation or hemorrhoids or something like that. And the anal type Freud talked about have two types. One, spend it all, get rid of it as fast as possible, the diarrhea effect, or hold on to it, and that's the constipation. In our country, we're taught by our system, hold on to it because you might not get it again. I studied with a man named Greg Whiteley out of Austin and now out of Idaho, and he told me the thing about money is if you hold up a dollar bill, it's finite. But if you spend it and someone spends it, someone else goes on, it's infinite at that point. It can go on forever by spending it. Now, of course, the tax system kind of interferes with that idea, but if it wasn't for that, it would be totally infinite because it would be spent. So when money moves in flow, it's infinite. When it just is stored, it's not infinite, it's finite. And the secret of as all the money masters have talked about is being able to let go. Not let go on credit, because if you let go on credit, that's not faith, that's faith in credit, not in flow. But you should be able to let it go, and then the money exactly comes to you. And I think on some of my prior shows, I won't repeat those stories, but it's happened to me, just like when you need it.
That's a really great point. Yeah.
Oh, hey, I will tell one that I haven't told before. I had a desk, and I was doing iridology with a slit lamp. And I wanted my desk in my bedroom to be out there to do iridology on people. But then I wouldn't have a desk. So I said, I'm going to manifest a desk. To heck with it, I'll figure it out later. So I start to drag that desk out to the living room. And suddenly I hear beep, beep, a horn beeps. And it's my girlfriend. And she says, hey, do you want a desk? I said, well, yeah, I want a desk. He says, my boss is giving one away. And I'm just giving it to Goodwill or whatever. And so I thought maybe you'd want it. Yeah, okay, come with me. So we went and picked it up in her bigger, larger car. And I moved a really big black desk, a big thing, into my living room. And I had to drag the rest of the other desk out of the way to make room to get it in. Now that's manifestation.
That's incredible. Wow. This is a
That's
good
why it's
little
hard
myth.
for me to believe in what's called sequential matter. I believe in synchronicity because I've had too much of that stuff happen to me over my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Does our bodies slow down the amount of digestive enzymes that we make as we age? That's something I've heard a lot.
Massage the right side of your body, just about any place. But if you pick the colon points, again, the right side is for the absorption in the webbing between the index finger and the other. You could rub just the fascia lata. You can rub, actually it gets tricky. In the back it reverses. So actually, to absorb it, you go to the back of the left side. See, we're in polarity, 3 ways, back and forth on either side. Now, when I talk about left and right traumas, I'm going from the feet, from the motor movements, to not confuse anybody, but I'm getting them from the back of the body to read out. Because where does the brain start? At the lip. Isn't that the brain governor meets at the bottom, the so-called conception meridian? They meet right there. So everything from the nose back is the back of the body. So I'm measuring the back of the body and the front of the body and getting left and right. The feet will never let you down. Otherwise, you can get kind of confused. Like, is this wrist, is it male or female? Is that wrist part of the back or things reverse? I have the front of my body here and the front of my body here, and yet the polarity is completely different. So basically, you work the front of your body to absorb on the right, and then you massage the left side on the back and the shoulders on back to the leg. And that actually does it throughout the whole body. It absorbs everything. Lung enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, liver enzymes, whatever you want. You can just generally do that.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah, I've been getting back into getting regular massages and like deep tissue, and she'll find a point, super skilled, where she'll just dig in and it's like a knot or something. And I just feel like what you're saying makes me think that's regular massages are so important because it's kind of working everything, right? Like more than you think.
Yeah, they shouldn't go over an hour because you overstimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And then always at the end, you'll notice the massage therapist usually does a light thing to put you back in sympathetic tone. Otherwise, you'll be too relaxed. And when you're being massaged, you're actually over alkaline and susceptible to diseases as well as psychic abilities, by the way. So you always want to finish with that tone up. And it's always good to do something like skin brushing after a massage. Then you leave any of the side effects of the massage behind by activating the skin. If you had a whole bunch of flies walking all around you, it would be perfect. The same type of thing. You ever see these head stimulators? It's like an egg beater, and you just rub it on your head lightly. Anything light like that after a massage. And then the massage actually does a lot of good because you have to dig out some of those points and knots. You have to go in to get them. But when you do it, sometimes you leave a bigger knot behind that goes reflexologically to somewhere else, unless you don't have a strategy to go back to sympathetic tone and dermalogic tone. That's the other companion to the sympathetic nervous system.
That's awesome. Yeah, I notice sometimes
another trick after massage, put yourself in life flow. Left hand down, right hand out slowly ideally 7 times, and then and you hold your hands downward. You don't go cross like that. The meridians follow your fingers or your zones. So you go down on the left, up on the right simultaneously, very slowly, and that will actually energize your life flow, which makes you less susceptible to accidents. When I drive with somebody who's a bad driver, I reach over and do it from the back, left and right, because it reverses in the back. So it's the same motion I make. Left hand up, right hand down, and then put them in life flow, because I'm protecting my life. I'm in the car with them, so if they crash that car, I'm going to be the victim too. Life flow is very important. A lot of people may be surprised that the military uses it. They use magnetic flow as the other way. They run the meridian down. They can't accept acupuncture, so they call it splitting the optical field. I was shown that by a Texas highway patrolman. He knew a lot about applied kinesiology. He said they call it control techniques. And the military, I started looking up control techniques. The military, most police forces, and sheriff's department are well aware with it, and they know that woo-woo stuff. But they're not going to tell people, because you can walk up to somebody and just put your hand down once and weaken them. So my highway patrol friend, he didn't go up to the person and go down, 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 I'm weakening you. He'd say, could I see your driver's license, please? And casually move his arm down. And it would weaken the person dramatically. You can experiment with that. Depending on how much chi a person, it will weaken. And I've seen people say, I can hold my Tai Chi teacher showed me how to center myself, and you can't do that. 1 out of 100 can do it. Most of them are just, they think they can do it, and they can't. They'll weaken. But there is a trick. When the cop does that to you, jump off the ground. The polarity reverses, and you're not weakened. So they might think it's strange that you jump off the ground. They wouldn't know what you're doing, though. That's not in the police manual.
Yeah, I don't know if it sounds like you've been everywhere, you probably have, but one time I went to try to see my friend up in Northern California in the Emerald Triangle, where they grow a bunch of weed up there, and he was a trimmer, and he worked on a farm, and I was driving my Prius, and I kind of was speeding and like taking the turns really fast because it was the middle of nowhere. I was just trying to get there before dark, and I got pulled over by the the people trying to bust people for drugs. And I had kind of longish hair at the time, and they made me get out of the car, and they thought I was smuggling cannabis, to in or out. And I just stayed calm, and they ended up letting me go. But I can't remember the name of those people, but they're always up in NorCal, kind of trying to bust growers and stuff. But it's interesting. Their tactics, intimidation, and
interesting. Some of that faded, by the way. I heard most of it, but you faded out a little bit there for whatever internet connection we're having. Otherwise, it's been pretty good.
Okay, good. Yeah, the audio is a little weird. Maybe they're trying to censor us here talking about poop. Someone asked, what about... probably true. A lot of things we don't hear. I used to do a lot of hitchhiking back in the day. And one day, and pick up hitchhikers. So one day I picked this guy up, and he told me, and I won't name the fire because they get in trouble, but there was a fire, and it made the news in L.A. big time. It was started when they burned down his marijuana field, and it got out of control and formed this huge forest fire. So they told him, you don't tell on us, we don't arrest you, and then let him go. So there's a lot of things we hear on the news that are not really true. That's funny. What about squatting versus sitting? Someone asked that, because I use like the little squatty potty thing, and I know just elevating your feet, like that became big. I think it was like 5 or 6, maybe longer years ago. There's a company that made the little stool that you can press up on your toilet, because if you're sitting normally, on the throne, then your colon's kinked. Is that right? Is that true or?
In India, the pot is on the floor. You just squat down like that. So yes, it makes sense. I have friends that are in the colonic business and the squatty pot business. One is in Austin. The Chinese don't like colonic machines, but they like his angel water. I think it's water of angels or angel water. They like his machine, so he's got the only colonic machine allowed into China. He sells colonic machines in this country, and you have to have a medical doctor back it up, which is really hard because they don't accept it. Every other country, about 18 countries, it's ordered by the MDs, but not in the United States. I find that fascinating. The water angel, I think he calls it. And definitely, he gave me two those squat pots back in the day when I traded a workshop for it. And we have one in our bathroom here too. Yeah, they work.
Have you ever heard of someone having like their own personal colonic machine at their house or?
Yes. My friend Jimmy Gerard, who made probably the best colonic machine in the world until the Texas government put him out of business by fining him several $1,000s a day because they suddenly decided they didn't like colonic machines in Texas. He sold one. The last time I saw him, he'd gone up to Northern California and sold a colonic machine for personal use to a 101-year-old monk. One of the most unusual people. He brought videos back of this guy. This guy, he was in the zone. He was something else. But he showed him how to self-colonic, and he gave himself his own colonic in the privacy of his monk thing. And because he knew that it actually could extend his lifespan. So there it is. Yeah, he did it himself. And you can do it yourself. When I was a colonic therapist, I would give colonics to myself. We would have a 2-hour lunch hour, and I would do it. I had one guy come to me and say, I don't feel anything. I thought you're supposed to get high doing this. And it's really mostly a myth. But at one point, I was giving myself a colonic with a type of machine where you can actually do a yoga shoulder stand on the table. So I'm doing a yoga shoulder stand, and the humor of having this thing up my butt while I was doing it struck me, and I broke into paroxysms of laughter for about 10 minutes. And I realized I was clearing an emotional trauma. I'll tell you another story. There was a woman who had a trauma, and I advised to get a colonic. Well, every time I go to tell her that, I would be, I was working for her cognitive trauma, what set it off. So my friend kept interrupting me, you need a colonic, you need a colonic. So on a hunch, I muscle tested her, and you can actually do this. I asked a silent question. Should I pursue what I'm telling her? And the muscle blew out. Then I said, should you get a colonic? It was strong. So they asked me, what are you doing? Just doing a test. So anyway, she goes in for the colonic. I'm alone in the restaurant part of the clinic that Adonalay had. I hear her screaming and yelling and a bunch of sobbing going on. And so she finishes her colonic. I'm the only one in the restaurant. She comes out and she sits across from me and she says, I was anally raped. And I went, holy cow. Now, if I'd found that trauma, but see, she re-experienced it with the colonic. So that's why the muscle testing told me, don't mess with it. Don't pick the fruit until it's ready to fall off in your hand. And she actually was anally raped. And so that was basically, it brought up the whole trauma. The therapist at O'Donnell knew how to go through color cycling and yawning and stretching and all the things you need to do to help process that type of trauma.
Wow, that's incredible. This is a good one. My partner and I eat the same. Why does he have more gas than me?
I heard the first part of that.
Why does he have more gas than me?
The last part got cut off. In other words, one is having the different results.
Yeah, yeah. I guess her partner has more gas. He's more gassy, but they're eating the same foods.
More trauma. And also, there's a lot that happens between the mouth and the colon. One of them, first of all, is how often does one chew the food? Is one chewing 52 times, or one 100 times, and one 5 times? Is one getting sufficient saliva in there? And the saliva might be from a particular food, so they might be thinking they're eating the same much, but are they eating the same amount of food? Are they using the same amount of condiments? Does one like cayenne pepper and one doesn't? Does one like salt and one doesn't? All kinds of things. And then emotional trauma, as I explained, I gained 10 pounds by sleeping in a culvert overnight, is what the trauma was. I had a rough day that day, and I came home 10 pounds heavier. I met a woman that said, I gained 30 pounds in 1 month. And it turned out to be she didn't accept her new son's wife. And she was so traumatized by it, she fell down the stairs. And when she fell down the stairs, she injured some kind of point, obviously, and she gained 30 pounds in 1 month. So trauma can inflate you like a balloon, and then you can get rid of the trauma and deflate yourself. Same reason I don't gain weight, because I've learned to deal with trauma. I punch paper bags, I kick paper bags, I scream and yell. In my life, I've had 2 potential heart attacks. I had the symptom of my finger, I had the chest pains and everything. I was under extreme stress. What did I do? I screamed. I screamed and yelled. I was in a car one time driving across the desert with all of my possessions in an open pickup truck, worrying about rain and everything, and the engine light comes on and says, danger, danger, danger. So I'm thinking, oh my God, if I leave the car here out in the middle, all my stuff is going to be gone. My notes, my everything, it's going to be gone. So I started having the symptoms of a heart attack. So I started screaming and yelling and yawning and opening my mouth and rubbing my chest and everything, backed it right off. So most heart attacks are actually gas. Gas pressure gets in there, and then you have actual damage. Then you have embolisms and all that stuff that goes with it after the damage is done from not getting the correct amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide to the area. First, heart attacks are almost invariably gas attacks. And what do? Anytime you're having something like that, start screaming and yelling your head off and make yourself well. I've done it twice, and a friend of mine, at 28, he had a heart attack, and he beat his own chest on the way down to the floor and brought himself to consciousness and never went to the doctor. And after that, he ate, what was he eating? I have to think of this particular grain that's really good for the kidneys. Kidneys provoke a lot of heart attacks, by the way. They're related to the heart. The ear, you notice the ear looks like a kidney? And they say that's a heart attack line. You'll find a heart attack line in people's earlobe. It's actually a kidney line, and the kidney is a shunt. You'll have underdeveloped ears as a sign of a heart problem. And the ears and the kidneys, they relate because the kidney is a shunt to the heart, not the other way around.
Wow, that's cool. Candida.
Healthy kidneys, it's going to be hard to have a heart attack.
That's awesome. What about Candida? That's not just focused on the gut, because it can spread its like tendrils throughout the body, right? But a lot of people are confused about Candida, and what do you mean sugar for Candida?
Yeah, immunity. And Ray Peat, pretty much I agree with Ray Peat over the years. He says that Candida becomes aggressive if you don't feed it sugar, its regular food. And so then it comes in and forms tendrils. They have a specific name, actually, in Candida speak. And they go into start eating you instead of the garbage in your intestines. And according to Adonal Lay, they actually prevent cataracts by having Candida. But it's when it gets colonized. H. pylori is a natural part of everybody's body. So is Candida. It's when it gets out of control from reduced immunity and immunity challenges that the stuff happens. So here's the point when they started that no sugar business. I had a girlfriend back in the day, and she went on a candida cleanse, and they gave her this diet. And then that didn't work, so she told me, I'm going on a more limited one. And finally, after 3 or 4 years of this and getting worse and worse, she said, I don't know what to do. They want me to just eat rice. That's all. Nothing else. I can't do this. And she storms out of the health food store. She comes back about, a couple of months later, and she's looking healthy and vibrant. And she says, I cured my candida. I said, what'd you do? A Haagen-Dazs fast for 3 days. Lots of sugar and Haagen-Dazs. And so when I first heard repeat, I had a good laugh out of that because I thought it was in her head, the Haagen-Dazs, but actually it's what she needed. The candida relented, and instead of attacking her, ate the yummy ice cream. So anyway, we all have candida, and you just don't want it to colonize. And that's an immunity problem. Having some sour food and some bitter food, Swedish bitters, coffee is a bitter food, and even tea is a bitter food. There we go. You hear that what the English say about Americans? They say, you Americans are so funny. You make tea for a bitter, and then you add sugar to sweeten it. Then you heat it up to make it warm, and then you put ice in to make it cold. Anyway, but it's bitters, and bitters are important. Theobromine in chocolate, theophylline in tea, caffeine in coffee. They all actually are involved in others. I'm just giving the main chemical component of each of those three.
This is one that jumped out to me. Hydrogen sulfide SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But she said hydrogen sulfide. I guess if that's in the gut, you know about that?
That can cause it? Not if your bowels are moving on time. Okay. You will get, some people are hydrogen producers and some aren't. I forget the exact statistic, but some people can actually put a match when they fart, and they can get a bazooka, flamethrower, come out of the back end. Other people can't do that. They don't have that. And it seems to be associated with a type of semi-bacteria called archaeons, if you've heard about it. There's a big to-do about them now that they can live in volcanic vents, and they don't use oxygen to metabolize. They use sulfur, and the other one uses methane. And it's interesting that the Swami I studied with, before I ever heard about these creatures that live in vents, he claimed that we are actually the product of space aliens. And he said we as carbon-based beings were inhabited by silicone-based beings, sulfur-based beings, and methane-based beings. And it fits the Osage Indian myth of the Earth people and the Earth Sky people and the water people. I mean, I was amazed to study Osage mythology, which fascinated me because it was the same thing. Well, shortly after that, they started to discover that diatoms are silica, and they make production out of it, and we actually use silica in our bone. And then they found out that maybe 10 times the protoplasmic mass of the entire Earth is sulfate-based bacteria and methane-based bacteria that are under the ground, and that they work that way. One thing that convinced me that maybe it is panspermia, they came from outer space, is that I asked Adano, carbon is an element, sulfur is an element, silica is an element, silicon, but what about methane? That's not an element, that's a combination. I said, is there an element that goes with that? And he said magnesium. And so guess what? It turns out that when I studied further over the years, I found that the metabolism of the sulfur-based bacteria is iron and sulfur, and the magnesium is methane. And so that's actually what builds our heart chakra is magnesium, strangely enough. If his ideas are true, I give you this with you see if it if it sticks against the wall, keep it. If it doesn't, just let it pass. I find it fascinating, and I'm not sure if I believe in space aliens or not.
We had someone ask a joke here. They said, "Is he a grandpa or just an old fart?"
Yeah, it depends. I'm an old fart and a great grandpa. Yeah. One of my grandsons. I don't hang around with family that much, but one of my grandsons is now a celebrity. He's called what's his name? Something. It's So Frosty. That's her first name. It's So Frosty Bergstrom, and he's a champion. And what do you call these type of games? They have video game championships where they have a huge deal. He can just he just rocks on that machine, and so he's like a celebrity. He's the best moneymaker in that particular game. And my son tried to get him stop spending all that time on the computer, and now he's really happy that his son didn't pay attention to him because he's now a celebrity. You'll find videos on him on YouTube and every place. It's So Frosty Bergstrom.
I love it. Have you looked into all the sayings, by the way, like kind of piggybacking on that question? I'm going to cuss here, but like shit happens, or they say he's full of shit. Like, is there something to these sayings that people have related to poop?
Wait, listen to all the what that they have?
Oh, like the sayings that people that we have, like he's full of shit, or he's shit happens, I think is the name of one of your chapters in your book. Have you looked into like the sayings related to poop?
Yeah, well, we can, trauma and various ways make us poop, and pressurization. I don't know if I told you that. I go down and touch my car, and it makes me poop. Vibrant Gal's amazing. In fact, every time I start to go downstairs, she says, "Wait, I have to go to the bathroom." Don't go downstairs, because as soon as I go down to the car, I don't feel like I have to go to the bathroom at all. And suddenly, oh my God, I'm running up the stairs as fast as I can to get to the bathroom. Some kind of psychological thing. Car is movement, again, a moving trauma that tied in with it. And also, I'm really sensitive to cold and hot liquids. Makes me go to the bathroom. So I have no problem sometimes going sitting on the pot 7 times a day. So, and I'm not sure if that's too much or not. I know we need at least 3 and maybe 4. And I think even Dr. Kellogg, who I'm writing another article from him about how to massage the colon, because you can massage it and it teaches you tricks on how to feel the organs. Like, how do you find your stomach? Drink 3/4 of a glass of water, and then you can hear it gurgle by where you're moving, and you can find its exact borders where the stomach is. Because the stomach can move as much as a foot with you lying down and standing up, and that shows the flexibility. How secure is the stomach there? And there's tricks for finding the ascending, the descending, the transverse colon, and the hardest one, which you can't find, is the what they call the sigmoid colon in that area, because the other parts of the colon often overlap it where you can't get to it. But anyway, they can do more by massaging the colon and finding out by percussive massage more about what your intestines are than they can with an X-ray or a CAT scan or any of those new things. The old-time doctors, they went by touch. They could tell. Here's an example. I bring a friend of mine to Donald Lay's, and he's kind of freaked out by him. He says, "Well, I'm going to go now." But then Donald Lay looks at him and says, "Well, I know your problem, though." So, of course, my friend kind of takes that as a challenge. What? And he comes forward and he touches his, let me see where he touched him, his ascending colon, and points to by the ileocecal valve. It says, "You have a corn chip stuck right there." And he got a treatment because he just had a whole bag of nachos the night before with these corn chips, and that's when the problem started. So then he went and got a session. So I asked the donor, "How did you tell that?" So a butcher can feel in the intestines of an animal and know what's the contents are, or sausage, what kind of meat's in there. They can tell pig meat or beef meat or whatever by just feeling it. It still didn't answer how he did it from 15 feet away, but he claimed he could feel with his line. In fact, he said, psychic surgery starts with a hickey, right? You're infecting the outside of the body, comes and moves a hickey. Anyone who went to high school and had a girlfriend knows what the hickey is. And he said, it's the beginning of psychic surgery. You just do it from without. And I have met psychic surgeons working in metaphysical bookstores. Some of them legitimate, some of them total fake, with the pig guts and all that stuff.
Does that apply to cupping as well? Because I just had that done recently, like where they do the suction cupping.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's actually it. That's a perfect example of psychic surgery in a way. It's a trick. And it's a reflex point because it sucks up. When you press down, you tend to anesthetize and overstimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, you want to do that. Extreme pain of childbirth, you don't want them to experience that. You want to turn it off, but you want to turn it back on again. Once you want sympathetic tone in a person and their blood flow to be correct, you use suction like that. So, yeah, suction cups are excellent for that. We've messed with that. Come to think of it, we haven't done it for a while, but a few years back we were messing with them. Yeah, they work.
Yeah, I felt great. What about this one? Is kombucha actually good for gut health? A lot of people drink that kombucha.
What is it?
Oh, kombucha, like the SCOBY, the
yeah,
fermented.
no,
beverage.
it isn't. No, yes, no. Well, yes, no, maybe. I agree. I don't agree with Andrew Weil on a lot of things, but I do agree on that. If you have a problem like requires an antibiotic, yeah, then drink it. You might get rid of it. But it's not something to be drinking on a regular, ongoing basis. I tasted it once and figured, nope, not for me. It's getting into the fermented type food category, so it's really not a good idea. But knowing how to make it, if you need it for an antibiotic, combined with garlic, then you get a symbiotic effect, and then it could be useful. So I'm certainly not against it, but it should be used therapeutically and at night, because most of your fungus grows at night. When I first met Andrew Weil, in fact, he's the first one that told me that you can take a mushroom, look how weak it is, and supposedly at that time they didn't think it had any minerals in it. You can put it under a driveway, and by morning, the driveway is cracked. That soft mushroom has gone right through it. And guys, if you want Gallic power, that's what the mushroom is. It's the atomic bomb. You notice how a mushroom looks like an atomic bomb? It is an atomic fraction. It's the 4-second lift. When you get freezing water, it will lift a piling completely out of the ocean in a dock. You have to be careful. The whole thing gets destroyed by lift. That's called frigidity implosion. And a mushroom is a master of frigidity implosion. So it's a very important sex food. Forget olives and all of those and sardines. They're good, but the mushroom outdoes them all.
Wow. I've been doing like fermented noni shots. Have you ever looked into that? Like noni, supposedly it's super cleansing, like the noni fruit.
It's better if you get it fresh. But noni, yes. A friend of mine is from Kauai, where he got the noni right off the tree. So yes, there's something to noni, definitely. And in supplement form, it just depends on how well they make it. But yeah, noni's okay.
That's awesome. Yeah.
By the way, a lot of people don't know that the goji berry is part of the deadly nightshade family. People who I don't take tomatoes or potatoes because it's not in the macrobiotic diet. What about goji? They take that. That's exactly what it is. One of the same family as cayenne and goji.
what are your thoughts
It's
on
good.
that? On that, yeah, because I have a friend that says drink goji tea, don't eat it straight. It's better for you if you brew the goji berries in a hot tea versus eat them by themselves.
They're an okay food. There's an argument of whether the ones raised pharmaceutically, I mean raised in rows versus the ones that grow wild. What do they call the other name for it? They have another name for the one, and that's how they differentiate them. Often they get the terms mixed. But yeah, they're good. The wild one is generally better. Do you know, like ginseng? The ginseng that grows wild that they hunt can go for as much as $50,000 a piece of ginseng, one root. They back in the day it was $25,000, and now I think it's even raised up more. They're so valued. That's why if you give a substitute a wild ginseng for a planted agricultural one in China, you could get the death penalty for it. It's serious business.
Wow. Let's do a few more questions here. What is good for prostate health?
One of the things is get over your father trauma. Inevitably, just like a uterine problem often has to do with the mother and a woman, and a prostate problem has to do with the father. The other thing, and of course we've discussed this before, I'm a believer in get out the waste products. I'm not a person for seminal retention. The more you get it out, the better, in my estimation. I've met men who have 5 ejaculations a day, and they had more chi than any of these so-called martial artists that I've seen. That guy was awesome. His wife said, "Yeah, 5 times a day."
Yeah, well,
he turned out to be a gangster, so I stopped hanging out with him.
We'll have to dive into that in our sex episode, because that's a big misconception. Is that whole thing, the seminal retention and Montauk Chia thing. And what you say is interesting about a battery. You don't keep a battery charged. Like, I used to drive an electric car with a lithium-ion battery. You don't want to charge it above 80% and keep it there, because it'll decrease the life of the battery. I don't know if that translates to humans, but
yeah, it's a rechargeable, and I regard it kind of like a bowel movement, but not as much. and I don't have that problem when I touch my car. Yeah, there's 2 schools of thought, and that seminal retention thing now. Amma, the hugging saint, who is the real deal. I've had experiences with her. She's an amazing woman. But she said that you can use seminal retention, but you need someone to direct you to put the energy. Most people have no idea what to do with that, and then it's harmful for almost everybody. But a person who's trained by yogis, and these are persons that can control the anal sphincter and all the muscles that go around that area. There's multiple muscles there, and there are yogis that have control out of all of those muscles. I met a man who could sing with his tailbone and sing with the top of his head, with his mouth closed. He could sing. He was a master of nadi, Swami Nadabrahmananda, one of the most amazing yogis I've ever met. Yeah, he could hold his breath for a half hour. They pumped the oxygen out of the oxygen chamber. The monkey died. The candle went out. Half hour later, he's fine. I met him personally, and he was a master of nadi. He went on this cosmic vacation here in, I think the 1990s. Amazing man.
I liked in an interview, I think it was with Justin or something, that you talked about a hyperbaric oxygen, and how if you get the pressure high enough, you don't need a single red blood cell.
The equivalent of 33 feet under the water will do it, and so they used to pressurize hospitals to do that. At one point, now what I would add is 3% carbogen. Carbogen is a company, and they make carbon dioxide for that very purpose. 3%, 5%, and 7%. And I think the 3% is better because mining engineers over 100 years ago knew to add that much carbon dioxide to their oxygen when they gave it to prevent caissons diseases and all these other problems they had. So anyone this country is missing, the world is missing the action and the healing by simply having every hospital, instead of a cat machine, it's cheaper to have a hyperbaric machine. They have 3 portable ones in San Diego that come to your house with a little coffin-like thing. And in the 30s, they had an entire hospital, 6 stories high, pressurized, every room except the corridors in between them. And they were healing people. But when you add the carbon dioxide or ordinary atmosphere, you take the atmosphere here and pressurize it down, and then you get even better results, because popular science years ago in the 30s found out that you can't keep animals alive on just oxygen and carbon dioxide over extended period of time without helium, argon, you have spacing on the other ones. You know, the other gases that are there that we need. They have functions in anatomy that aren't chemical. In the same way, nitrogen isn't chemical, but why can it give you the bends and all of that? It doesn't interact with things usually, in the air at least. It has to be, lightning has to hit it to activate it, or we have to have bacteria process it to be able to use it. But there are other uses. Obviously, the inflation of our body and the so-called gaseous part of ourselves is mostly nitrogen, and then oxygen, and then carbon dioxide is a minor residue that is the control switch for the other gases.
That's awesome. Last question here. I think this is a good one. What does Adam think of taking activated charcoal?
Not much. I differ. You know, people worry about caramelization. Your potato's going to get a little brown, and then they caramelize to the utmost degree. Now, here's the thing, though. When I say not much, I have some in my medicine cabinet because it's a universal antidote. Almost any poison you can take, if you get it in fast enough while it's still in the stomach, you can neutralize it. So one day, a friend of mine's son decided to commit suicide by taking a drug. So I had them get activated charcoal. We stuffed it down him, and everything was going fine till his sister came out and said, "What? You can't do this. You've got to take him to the hospital." So we took him to the hospital, where they charged him a bill of $400 when it was all over. But at the desk, she said, "What have you done for this?" I said, "I gave him activated charcoal." And the nurse said, "Oh, that's what we're going to do." So as a universal antidote, but for cleaning your colon out and all of that, it blocks all the minerals and everything in it. So it's really not a good choice. And it's become, what is her name? The Goop lady and David Wolf and people, they're quite a bit into it, but nope. It's good for emergencies. That's why I keep it handy. Even niacin I keep handy, but I don't take it. They're for the medicine cabinet. But when people take it on a regular basis, they're messing with their intestinal ecology throughout, from the stomach to the small intestine, all 3 sections of it, and all 3 sections of the large intestine, actually all 5 sections of the large intestine.
Okay, one more actually, because I spotted a good one that we didn't cover. What are your thoughts on transit time and the role that fiber plays on the gut? And I think you've talked months, it might have been last year when I had you on the show, about transit time. And if you eat like raw nuts and seeds, you can count how long it takes to go through you. Sure.
Let's see. I'm still missing it. I didn't quite get the question.
What are your thoughts on transit time after you eat food? Like how long it takes to go from mouth to anus, and the role that fiber plays in that process?
The time to go through. Yeah, I get you. You know, ideally, and this can vary for certain people because some people have longer intestines than others, etc. But ideally, we're set up on a circadian rhythm to eliminate our breakfast at supper time, our lunch at breakfast time, and our supper at lunchtime. That's basically how it's set up. And if you eat according to growth period, which means tree foods in the morning, vine foods in the middle of the day, as a broad terminology, and root foods at night, or the animals that eat those. So what is going to eat your grass and your vine foods are going to be your cows and your pigs and your chickens and all of those. And then your root foods, it's going to be fish and mushrooms and things like that for people who eat fish. Actually, there are fish without omega-3 fatty acids in them, so it's no problem to eat orange roughy, I believe it is, and some catfish. But anyway, it's designed that way, and that's designed to push through 3 times a day. When I started doing that in 1975, I guess, or 76, somewhere around there, I've had no problems with my bowels since then at all. And I did before.
Okay. And what about fiber? Because I've noticed when I cut out fiber, I have issues. So, like, I've been using the raw carrot and potatoes, but I don't have lots of good fruit up here. But because people cut out fiber completely, it's probably not a good idea, right?
Eliminating fiber. You see a lot of these people saying it's the bad guy. And actually, it's the good guy if you have the fiber in the food. Like a kiwi fruit is 25% fiber. A prune is 25% fiber. So there's lots of fiber in these foods themselves. But when you artificially take one out of growth period and otherwise, it makes a difference. So I worked out at a gym, and this school teacher was working out with me, and he said he took oat bran. So I told him, at that time not knowing all the bad stuff about oat bran, I said, take it at the middle of the day. Don't take it for breakfast. He said, I take it for breakfast. I'll try it in the middle of the day. It works better. So I saw him a week later and said, are you still taking the oat bran now in the middle of the day? Heck no. I had to stop. I said, why? It makes me fart. He said, well, that's what it's supposed to do. I'm a teacher. I can't be up there in front of people and farting all over the place. So the whole idea is to make you fart. When you take it at the wrong time of day, it can actually stuff up your colon. So if you are going to take oat bran synthetically, you take it at the middle of the day, not at nighttime. And you get your roughage out of potatoes and other things at night. And your morning roughage comes from certain fruit. And say, well, kiwi, 25%, prune, 25%. You get plenty of it.
And with the pineapple juice,
and by the way,
that tequila combo. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the tequila helps too. Yeah, actually, that's a good combo to take at night. I take the coffee, cocoa, and maple syrup in the morning, and then I take the tequila. They're hormone builders as well. They don't. Cobalamin tonic means B12. It doesn't necessarily give you B12, though they argue about whether cacao has it in or not. But it activates it and makes it useful. We need synergizers in our body as well as the thing itself. Iron isn't going to absorb without vitamin C, because actually vitamin C is chelated iron. And otherwise, it's plain ascorbic acid. Now, say you have too much iron. You just take vitamin C and as little iron as possible. Then it joins up with the iron and takes it out of your body. But if you want to put it in, you take vitamin C and iron, then it puts it in, often too much of it. So when you take vitamin C as a way of cleaning iron out of your body, there's no problem whether it's in a pill form or even in the food form, completely different categories, but they both do tend to remove iron when you don't take iron.
Wow, that opens up a whole can of worms for me. I want to talk for another hour on that, but I'll stop. But yeah, because I know ascorbic acid will deplete copper, from what I understand, but maybe the benefit outweighs that in context, kind of like a yes, no, maybe thing.
Yep. Technically, lippfuscin can use copper, but as Morley pointed out in a recent show that we did together, there's so little of it in the body compared to iron. Why would it go for copper when it can grab iron out of there? So usually copper is not a problem for any kind of lippfuscin effects at all. One that is, though, is manganese. I can't tell you exactly why, but people that get too much manganese And a lot of people, in the repeat people, go, I got to get more manganese. I got to get more. If you analyze amyloid plaque in people's brains, you're going to find mainly iron, and then magnesium, manganese, not magnesium, manganese second, and then you'll find some aluminum also, which is not the primary part of Alzheimer's, but it does play a part when you get too much fluoride in your water, which frees the aluminum and puts it in your brain with the fluoride. But anyway, those two. So copper, I've never heard of anyone really getting lippfuscin buildup or yellow fat disease from eating copper. And of course, it's used in batteries. It's a very beneficial element for a lot of things.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned
for sex,
aluminum.
For instance, sex and for the prostate, very good. Zinc, by the way, can cause prostate cancer, and copper can prevent it.
Wow.
That's kind of a surprise for a lot of people out there taking zinc for their sex life, isn't it? Or for certain viruses and things. Sorry about that.
My favorite quote from you so far is, if you think chi is stored in your balls, you're a male chauvinistic pig. I think it was from one of your books.
Women will tell you that. Yeah, you know, in a lot of those seminal retention, women aren't supposed to do that. Women, of course, have the ability to have hundreds of orgasms. Some of them do. Men don't generally have that. In fact, Kinsey hired women because he wasn't allowed to touch them. So many of them could just use their mind and orgasm all they wanted to. And so that's how he got to study their orgasms, because he couldn't use any kind of objects with women. You know, he didn't get in trouble writing his sex book on men, but when he went into women are supposed to have orgasms, that's when they cut into his action and made him die in poverty, basically, and out of trauma. I think he died of a heart attack from all the stress. They never attacked him with men having orgasms, but as soon as he went for women, that was the end. That was the end of his career. Went down the toilet.
Wow. That is wild. Well, thanks, Adam. This was awesome. And I think we, even though we're both all over the place, I think we kept it pretty focused this time around.
We sort of kept along the colon, kind of, you know. A little bit of leaky gut syndrome here and there.
Yeah. Yep. And I always appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom and just your energy. We all love it and appreciate you, and it's always so much fun, and all the stories that you have to share.
Thanks. Yeah, and go to solartommy.com, and that's where we have all these books. I got about 45 of them now, and now I'm doing newsletters, and I'm coming out one about current events. I won't go into that. You have to go to other places in Facebook to find out about that, like One Radio Network, and some other places do have my private opinions that I'm not allowed to say elsewhere. So I learned to shut up, because otherwise, you know, if they crash places I'm at, I'm out of business. I'm homeless. So buy my books, please.
Yeah, I'll put the links below.
Appreciate all you do, Matt. By the way, you know what I admire about you is you go out and do it. You don't just talk about it. Chickens are good. I'm going to go raise them. This is good. I'm going to go do that. Hyperbaric chamber. I'll bet one. That's really great. I mean, really good. You don't walk your talk, you talk your walk.
I appreciate it. And it's always making mistakes. And you know, I try to be open as much as I can, and open about what I change and everything, you know, whether it's spirituality or whatever. So, yeah, I appreciate that a lot.
That is actually amazing. And God knows I've made enough mistakes coming down the line. It's hard to admit them, but, you know, we do. We're humans. We don't come with an owner's manual, so we have to kind of figure this out ourselves. And we're told by one person, eat this. Another person says, don't eat it. Do this, do that, don't that. And so ultimately we have to figure out how we can develop our bodies and learn. And know that there's exceptions to the rules. You're going to see Mr. Eats-All who can eat sessions. unfortunately, about 99.9999% of us can't eat sustenance for lunch. Or I guess it would be a morning food since it flies in the air.
Well, I'm gonna make that tequila pineapple thing because for some reason red wine, I've been drinking it for years, but just a small, half glass, but I get a sneezing reaction and my nose gets itchy. I don't know if it's bringing up a trauma, but my nose gets crazy itchy when I drink red wine.
Kidney time is a good time to do that. Now, some people will have a reaction. They want to blame the sulfites for it, but it's actually the processing. A friend of mine met the person who invented the way to speed up the wine process and kill the bacteria without using new barrels. And that's what causes the problem. It's not the sulfites. They don't do it in places in Europe. But many times, let's see, if you take a sulfide, how can you neutralize that? Oh, homeopathically with a little garlic, and then those symptoms can go away. But get the purest wine you can, and a little bit of sulfides we're reacted to. A lot of people overreact to them, where they, one of the most bizarre cases, I must finish this one off. A woman went out to lunch at a restaurant, and she suddenly couldn't breathe. So they got an oxygen thing and rushed her to the hospital. And what does the doctor say? Heartburn. And I thought, wait a minute, don't take that purple pill. I mean, for God's sake, come and see me first. And so I asked her, as soon as she got to my friend's house, I said, do you have any kind of asthmatic condition? And she said, yes. You ate sulfur they put the sulfide in the food to preserve it in the cafeteria salad bar. So that's what she did. And to top it off, she had a little glass of wine. So combined, it put her in the hospital. And they wanted to tell her it was heartburn. She had to be on Nexium. Oops, I shouldn't mention drugs, but the purple pill for a long time. And it was misdiagnosis. Many people have those kind of reactions from having, if you don't have enough oxygen, and that includes carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is what makes us breathe, not the oxygen. Like recently, during the Kennedy assassination, what was the name of the governor of Texas? Connolly. Connolly got shot. His wife saved him his life by jumping on top of him, and his hand went over the hole in his lung. Now, how did it save his life? It kept the air from getting in his lungs and killing him. There's the proof right there that obviously it's the carbon dioxide that makes you breathe. If you have nothing but oxygen, your brain says, don't breathe. You got plenty. And carbon dioxide is the trigger. You can't breathe without it. That's such a classic example of Connolly's life being saved by his wife keeping his hand over that wound so no oxygen could get in it. Nothing was coming out. It was the danger was the actual air.
And just add some sugar to it too, right?
Right. Amen. Oh, there's a danger in sugar. I put my back out for 3 days lifting a 25-pound bag of sugar recently. I bought it, and then I instead of putting it up at a proper height, I bent over in a weird way to scoop it up into empty jars, and then my back got a little tight. So I woke up in the morning, I could barely stand. And part of that was having to do with a certain trauma, too.
Wow.
So now it's fast. That's my only bad reaction from sugar. Picking up the heavy bags. Ray Pete picks up 50-pound bags. Where does he get those? I'd buy one of those in a heartbeat.
He's keeping it for himself, yeah.
Right.
I love it. Well, awesome, Adam. Thanks so much, and I'll post the links to where people can check out your books below. And yeah, we'll have to have an episode on sex, and then an episode on mind hacking, and just keep it going. So.
Definitely.
Right on. Well, thanks so much. Stick around as I close out the show. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Thanks for being there, Matt. Thanks a lot.
Well, that is all for today's show. Hope you guys got a lot of nuggets from that one. I know I did. The pineapple juice and tequila was mind-blowing. I think it's so interesting that certain things are demonized, like sugar, even tobacco, alcohol, and I'm not saying these things cannot be overdone. Anything could be overdone, right? Even you take too much magnesium and you get loose stools, which can be beneficial with constipation, but it's counterproductive if you're trying to build your magnesium levels. I really liked what Adam said about mucus and the mucusless diet and the color that it should be. My experience with mucus is that it's produced while I'm in a city or right after I leave a city, where I can smell the car exhaust and we're driving with the window down, and my body does not get exposed to all of that because I'm very fortunate to have built a life where I live in the forest out of a major city. So I just got back from California, and the next day I'll just be discharging mucus from my sinuses, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's not beautiful in one sense, but it's a protective substance, and it's not necessarily increased across the board with dairy consumption, because that's a big misconception, is that blanket statement dairy creates mucus. The quality matters, the integrity of your pancreas matters, the integrity of your hydrochloric acid. There's so many factors to take into consideration before demonizing an entire food group like dairy. I think there's a reason why milk and cheese have been targeted so intensely, not only by the conventional system, but even by the alternative system, saying cutting out dairy and everything improved. You can see improvements by making any change. And so it's really those long-term improvements that we're looking for, not just changing and noticing that we feel better immediately, because that's not a major feedback event. The major feedback event is seeing how we are 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, etc., where we just keep improving. And that's what I find with healing my metabolism and not restricting carbohydrates and animal protein and just coming back to balance. I'm feeling myself getting stronger and more resilient each month that I consistently eat breakfast, 3 meals a day. I stay on the raw carrot, the gummies. The more consistent I am, the better my results. And of course, there's way more than food, as I talk about on this show. There's air quality, there's water quality, EMFs, light exposure. There's so many things that influence our health that are beyond nutrition. But once you dial in the nutrition, and you have the animal foods, and you're limiting polyunsaturated fatty acid intake while not being neurotic. If you go out to eat, you just pop your vitamin E and you don't worry about it. But you'll find that everything balances out. So I have people messaging me all the time on social media saying, what do you recommend for a million different health conditions, most of which I've never heard the name of, and I have to look up to see which organ or gland it's involved with. But no matter the complexity of the condition, that's why I created the CLF protocol: calcification, lippfuscin, and fibrosis. These are 3 things that accumulate in the body that inhibit oxygen from getting to the tissue. So a lot of people now are supplementing oxygen supplements, and they're doing a lot of things to try to alkalize and oxygenate the body. But meanwhile, they're magnesium deficient, they're copper deficient, they're iron overloaded, and they're PUFA overloaded, and they're calcium overloaded. And the supplemental D, the supplemental calcium, supplemental zinc, there's so many factors that are keeping them out of balance. So my message is strategic supplementation. You limit PUFAs, you live in balance, you don't restrict macronutrients, you don't restrict food groups, and go slow. And over time, the body will heal. You don't have to megadose supplements, especially when you start a new supplement. You always go slow and see how the body responds. But these conversations with Adam, you could see that there's so many layers going on that it really takes time to implement from different areas. And it is complex, but at the same time, it's not. And you can make it second nature, where you don't have to micromanage every little thing in your life to try to stay healthy. It can become a flow. It can become automatic, to where you're living your life, but you're also supporting yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, which is all connected with health. I always like how Adam brings up that vitamin D used to be called toxiferol, and they changed the name to cholecalciferol because toxiferol couldn't be marketed. And this is a continued debate. I was actually interviewed on Kitty Blomfield's Win at Life podcast. It's a great vitamin D debate. And it was kind of a 4-on-1. I was the only one that was questioning it. I question it mainly for the hypercalcification aspect. It'll also deplete liver retinol, which affects iron overload, and there's multiple mechanisms where supplemental cholecalciferol, aka vitamin D3, will cause imbalance in the body. And I just have too many questions at this point to justify supplementing it. I don't think at this point that it is smart to supplement vitamin D3. Either get it from light or get it from food. And the response to that argument is, well, what if I don't have access to the food? Like dairy, which contains vitamin D. Adam says you could just put your food out in the sun and get it. I've not experimented with that. And light. The argument goes, what if someone can't afford a $400 Sperti vitamin D lamp? And my answer to that is that's not the only light out there. You can get a reptile bulb, literally for your snakes and your bearded dragons that they sell at a reptile store. And that is a UVB, ultraviolet B radiation vitamin D lamp. And it's very cheap. And of course, there's coverage, and if you want to tan, and it can get pricey. The one that I have, I actually made a Mitolife Academy video about. It's a stand-up light. The reason I have this is because I live in northern Idaho, where I don't have ultraviolet light for 5-6 months out of the year. So this is a way for me to not just get my vitamin D, but to get my beta endorphin, to get my lumisterol, which is pre-D3. There's so many things that are created in the skin with UV light and with sunlight in general. I think it's really interesting that all of the focus gets put on secosteroid hormone D / vitamin D with sunlight. You know, they call it the sunshine vitamin, where that's really 1% in my eyes of the benefits of full spectrum sunlight. You're getting so many more compounds that are created in the body through that stimulus of invisible purple light. And I used to take this to the extreme. I would naked sunbathe in the cold water in the middle of the day, and I might get back to that at some point. But now that I have the context of lippfuscin and of polyunsaturated fatty acids in the skin, increasing photo damage from the sun, increasing UV-induced skin damage, especially when you synergize that with chemicals, synthetic chemicals caught in the tissues, in the skin, then you have to be careful. And there is a preparation. My pre-sun protocol, I'll probably make some Mitolife Academy videos on this summer, would be basically red light therapy and vitamin E. Those would be the main things that I use before I go outside and dose on UV light, especially midday at solar noon when the sun's the strongest. So I know that was a little rant, but I always get going when I think about vitamin D, and it's cool that Adam's on the same page with that because I just don't see the point in supplementing it. I really don't think it's necessary. I think it's not the only thing that controls parathyroid hormone. There are other control factors. The body is intelligent. It was designed intelligently to stay balanced even throughout the winter with no light stimulus whatsoever. So check out the previous interviews with Adam Bergstrom if you haven't. I always love having him on. I'm going to continue to have him on the show. He's been pumping out the newsletters on his website. It's solartiming.com. And this episode was based off of his newsletter, Turd Eye. He has 3 of those out as of this recording, March 2021. But he continues to come out with ones about yellow fat disease, mind hacking. He just released Medical Nemesis. And I'll have him on the show to break down a lot of these. And we'll do our best to keep it focused. It's hard because Adam and I kind of have he mounted his horse and rode off in all directions kind of vibe going on. So we could easily end up in outer space between the two of us. And we have to bring it back to earth and bring it back to the topic at hand. But seems like all of you love it. And like I said, there's so many nuggets, and I love all the little facts that Adam has somehow stored up there in his head. It's amazing that he can remember all that stuff. So check it out, solartiming.com. Support him by buying his ebooks. And he even has a lippfuscin compendium. It's called Yellow Fat Disease Compendium. And if you purchase it for $100, you get all the current yellow fat disease books and the future ones, which is pretty cool. So a lot of people question whether omega-3 fats or EFAs, PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats are essential. That is the book to get if you were on the fence, if you're convinced that they're essential for human health. He goes down the list of diseases that is caused by really highly HUFA, highly unsaturated fatty acid poisoning. It includes Alzheimer's disease, Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, frontotemporal dementia, Huntington's disease, glaucoma, macular degeneration, Lou Gehrig's disease, mixed dementia, vascular dementia, brown atrophy of the heart, cardiac necrosis, embryonic death syndrome, and more. I mean, the list is really long of what the PUFAs cause, and they break down into really harmful products. So I'm a big believer in vitamin E. I used that a few years back to recover from years and years and years of skipping breakfast. And I was on the autophagy thing. I thought that that was for longevity and anti-aging. It was caloric restriction. It was intermittent fasting. It was no or low protein for mTOR and all these complex things. And where I stand now is that longevity and anti-aging is mostly about lowering stress. That is the primary thing. I like that Adam always quotes these older women. I can't remember the exact quote, but she credited her old age to chocolate, books, and young men. And there's a lot of truth to that. If someone's living a life that they love, then they will live longer. And whenever I go into the city, it's depressing to me to see people doing things that they don't want to do, working jobs they don't want to work at. And I think at some point we'll have artificial intelligence or robots. I think that's already happening with fast food establishments. And that could get weird really quick. But I think the silver lining there is that it's going to free up people to pursue what they love. And I do believe that everyone has something unique to offer. It's just a matter of finding it. And for me, I didn't find that until my mid-20s, really, when I discovered natural health. And the deeper I got into it, the more in love with it I became. And now it's to the point where I could talk about health all day long. I could think about it all day long. And it's actually a de-stressor for me to connect the dots, to research, to have discussions with people about health. as long as we're not talking about symptoms, to me, that is tiring. And that is the hamster wheel. And that's where they want us to be, just focusing on the symptoms that we're experiencing, which is a never ending chase. And that's like the medical mafia hamster wheel. Adam Bergstrom calls it the medical nemesis. So there is a system in place. Some people would call it the matrix. And I believe that the primary means that they, whoever they are, use to control us is stress, keeping us stressed out so that we fight each other over race and religion and different beliefs. And we keep infighting because everyone's stressed out. And if you put animals in a cage together, like an apartment complex, and you stress them out, or in a city, then they will attack each other because they're stressed. So really the name of the game is to lower cortisol, and you're not going to do that on a ketogenic diet. You're not going to do that on any extreme diet, whether it be carnivore or vegan. You're going to do that by balancing out your body, limiting polyunsaturated fats, maybe utilizing anti-stress substances like vitamin E and bone broth or gelatin. I've been really hitting the gummies hard. I put a post on my Instagram page about the gelatin gummies. I also have a recipe on my website, matt-blackburn.com. I have a little recipe page. And at this point, I'm just using rectangular silicone molds. I'll have to update that page at some point soon. But those gummies throughout the day are just a game changer because you have the gelatin that's been bloomed. You have hopefully filtered water in it, some fruit juice, some sugar. I squeeze fresh lemon in it. And it's healthy gummies. They taste great. I would say just don't overdo it. I had someone message me and say her husband ate the whole batch and he got a stomach ache. I'm like, of course, he ate the whole batch. We're back to balance, right? And are there times to megadose? I believe so. But you have to really be in tune to know that. Because if you megadose out of time, then it can cause issues. Same with tequila, right? Like Adam Bergstrom talked about. It's just one shot. That's all it's needed. And that's the research that's been done on lippfuscin and ethanol, is a little bit inhibits lippfuscin. A lot increases its accumulation. So it's always the dose. And when people say that with vitamin D supplementation, I'd say, well, microdosing rat poison, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know if any dose of rat poison is intelligent, but that'll be a continued conversation because it's a really heated topic. People love that. And I'll have some vitamin D experts back on the show that don't just look at 2 molecules, but that look at 3 or more molecules, because there's definitely interconnectedness throughout the body. It's how the body works. It doesn't just work on 2 dots that are connected. There's usually 3, 4, 5, 6, 20, 30, 50 dots connected to look at the whole picture. And it's not making it overcomplicated. It's just being real and looking at reality. That's it. I got to stop ranting on vitamin D. If you want to support the show, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. I have my recommended products up there. The gelatin that I use, the medicinal mushroom products that I use. I really like the Alpha Dynamics Lion's Mane. I put that in my coffee before I do my shows. And I think I highlight this quite a bit, but the No Choice EMF protection clothing, I wore that recently to California. It was my older brother's birthday, and I flew down there. And that clothing really saved me. It was a night and day difference when I would start to feel irritable emotionally, because I'm in a pretty forest, secluded environment. I'm very blessed where I live. Very low EMF exposure. I still get hit a little bit, but it's nowhere close to being in the center of a city, like where most of my family and friends are. This clothing, the pants, the jacket, I even stack it with the Fawn's underwear, and even the stupid mask I have is EMF shielded, which if I have to put on the muzzle, that's the one that I wear. And such a difference. I put on the jacket, especially the torso. I mean, you think about the heart the liver, the kidneys, just your whole upper body there. It's so sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And just imagine if you're living in an apartment, or if you're driving, you're an Uber or Lyft driver or delivery driver like I did for several years straight, you're getting hammered and you're not grounded, which makes the EMFs hit you harder, makes the negative effects worse. And I plan to have a lot more episodes on electromagnetic fields, and there's good ones. It could be used for good, but the way that it's being used now is called weaponized, and it's real, and it's really the primary cause of many diseases, especially the rampant. I get questions about depression every single day. What do you recommend for depression? And while I could say magnesium, which will help, and it will help protect against EMFs, that is just one piece of what's causing the depression. And of course, this is my humble opinion. There's always context. There's always the history of the person and their traumas, and there's tons of aspects. But if we're just talking about the physical day-to-day aspect of what's causing anxiety, depression, ADD, etc., the EMFs, they really hammer the brain. They hammer it. And they'll change the pH of your saliva. Everyone's having digestive issues. That's why they're cutting out dairy and allergies. And you just add on all this stuff, and it's like, where's it all coming from? And people will point to glyphosate and the hybridized food and this and that and man-made foods. And is it? Or is it something more immediate that we're always being exposed to, which is called EMFs, Wi-Fi, cell towers, 5G towers? This is a really big deal. So anyway, I'll rant at a future time about EMFs when I have the EMF episode. I have some experts in mind that I want to have on the show to talk about what they do to human physiology. And Mitolife is my brand. That's my supplement line. I'm actually working on 4 new products right now. 2 water products and 2 new supplement products. And I'm also working on getting things back in stock. I've been having a lot of issues with the desiccated oyster, unfortunately. I don't know if it's because of COVID, but international deliveries have been getting held or delayed. So I'm working on that. But stay tuned. In the next month or 2, there should be at least 1, maybe even 2 new products out that I'm really excited to share with you. And thanks so much for continuing to listen to the show. I have a new episode every Friday. I have so much fun doing this. I learned so much. I hope you do as well. Stay supercharged.